Okay, good evening. It's been a while since we've had a live stream. Let's get the sports headlines up. Let's see what's happening in the wide world of sport this evening. Obviously, it's been quite a busy couple of weeks since the last live stream. A lot has happened. There's been a couple of sporting scandals. Some coaches have lost their jobs. Some players have been suspended or sacked from their various clubs. Some seasons have come to an end. Other seasons have just started. Uh, right, so let's have a look quickly at the sports news. Let's have a quick look. Oh God, England have lost again badly against Australia in the rugby. Oh dear, Steve Borthwick under a bit of pressure, considering this is not a very good Australia side. Just putting it out there. Um, Wow, 42 points. Wow, Australia beat England with last gasp try. Pity it's not on free to air TV and you have to pay for Amazon for it. Um, Mark Cavendish is to retire from cycling tomorrow. One of the greatest sprint cyclists of all time. Uh, Crystal Palace have lost again. Lopetegui's under a lot of pressure at West Ham. There's rumours that he might be the next manager sacked in the Premier League. Coventry managed to get a draw after sacking their manager. Aberdeen are trying to remain unbeaten in the Scottish Premiership. So there's that. Wolves have got their first league win of the season, so that eases some pressure on Gary O'Neill. But another manager potentially could be out of a job before the end of the season. Southampton are in serious trouble though, so they may potentially be getting relegated. So, as I say, a lot has happened since the last live stream. A lot has happened. Obviously, I discussed a lot of the NRL comings and goings. And in fact, just generally a lot of rugby league comings and goings. Also, since the last live stream, we've had Thomas Tuchel named as the new England manager, and some of the social media reaction, some of the mainstream media reaction, I felt was really poor, and I made my views clear on that. I don't think he's a bad choice for the manager's position for England. He's only on an 18-month contract. We'll see what happens at the World Cup should England qualify. That's his remit. His first remit is get qualified. Second remit is to win the thing. And he's very good in short, sharp bursts as a manager. He's keen to dive in and get started. So that's quite interesting. In regards to the NRL, obviously, we've seen some high-profile off-field incidents involving some very high-profile players that have had some very serious consequences this season and this off-season. Adai Carr's obviously been sacked by the Bulldogs. So if you're an NRL fan, where does Adai Carr end up? And of course, Ezra Mam did a video on the current ongoing situation at the Broncos and what the Broncos should ultimately do in that situation. It's going to be quite interesting what the Broncos decide to do. I mean, do they tear up his contract? Has a precedent been set by the Bulldogs? Do they tear up his contract? Do they cop the suspension? Do they internally suspend him? We'll have to wait and see what happens in the regards of the police and what they decide to charge him with, and if it does go to court and the outcome of that. And also the NRL, I mean, they've got to be pretty disappointed with the whole thing, considering that in 4 months' time, they open less than 4 months' time. Obviously, they're opening their season in Vegas with an expanded Vegas experience with 4 games instead of 3. Including a women's international, 2 regular season games plus a regular season Super League game. And with the NRL wanting to grow the overseas TV deal, get as much interest and eyeballs on rugby league as possible, having one of your biggest name players, several of your biggest name players involved in off-field indiscretions is not really the look you want when you're trying to promote the game to a new audience, and especially families, and encourage families to let their kids play the game and watch the game. It's not a good look when you've got high-profile players misbehaving and getting in trouble off the field. So there is that to bear in mind. On the footballing side of things, as I say, obviously Manchester United have obviously sacked Ten Hag, brought in Ruben Amorim. That was a very quick process. Makes me wonder if they'd already had informal discussions with Ruben Amorim's representatives in the summer for that process to be so quick, and for a deal to be signed so quickly, where he's released from the Sporting contract and takes over in 2 days' time. On Monday will be his first day in charge of his new team. So that's quite an interesting subplot. I think Ten Hag's future was actually decided in the summer, even though they gave him a contract extension. I don't understand why Manchester United did that, considering that he was sacked less than 4 months later, 5 months later. And on the Mark Robins Coventry City sacking, yes, I know they've got a decent result today, all things considered, but a lot of Coventry fans aren't happy with the board and how they've handled his sacking and why he was sacked and everything that's gone with that. They're very frustrated, very disappointed with the fact that he's been let go, considering the position the club is in now, where it was before he took over. So that has an interesting subplot in the background. Coventry fans are not happy with the ownership or the board. And again, Coventry City is a club that's had a lot of off-field dramas over the last 2 decades, a lot of uncertainty, financial problems, stadium issues, nearly going out of business, money, just a lot of issues off the field. The last couple of seasons, while they've come up short in regards to promotion back to the Premier League, they've had a couple of trips to Wembley, which, will live long in the memory. Yes, they lost both of those games on penalties, but they were within 45 minutes of embarrassing Manchester United last season. And of course, they got within a whisker of getting to the Premier League instead of Luton. So, what could have the future have been had either of those results gone their way? Would Coventry City still be a Premier League side? Had they won that shootout or held on to that 3-0 lead? What would the position be right now? Would the team be in the same position now? Potentially. That is a potential. In regards to they're in different form this season. But I have to feel, that it's not like there's a lack of effort from the players. It's not as if the players down tools. The fans were just getting frustrated with some of the indifferent, inconsistent performances, but they, weren't prepared for what, in my opinion, was quite an abrupt termination of his contract. But it's an interesting one. Some interesting news in the British touring cars, actually. They're moving from the hybrid era to sustainable fuels, basically fuels that are sustainable, therefore renewable, basically, synthetic, sustainable fuel systems, similar to IMSA. The hybrid era in British touring cars has been crap. I've watched one of the 3 seasons that they've had the hybrid engine platform in place. It hasn't worked. It's not been entertaining. It's been very expensive for teams. And the one-size-fits-all hybrid just hasn't worked. Several teams have pulled out, so the grid's smaller than what it was before, partly by design, which I don't think is necessarily the right way to go. I didn't enjoy the hybrid era. The way that their hybrid was brought in was pushed past, which is not, in my opinion, what the hybrid should be for. That is not the right way to have balance of performance. So they've gone to the sustainable, renewable kind of fuels where they're either biofuels or they're fully synthetic and sustainable. However they're doing, I think it's bioethanol that they're going to be using. I think it's 80% bioethanol content, soon to be 100%, which is what I personally think road cars should be using instead of going EV. But that's my personal view on the con that is electric vehicles, which are actually more polluting for the environment. But that's another thing. Don't let Greenpeace hear me say that. The British touring cars have changed their engine regulations yet again, and their regulations yet again after just 3 years, which that is mad. When you've got team development and car development, you can't really develop a program in such a short space of time from scratch with testing and homologation. That is a really drastic rule change. In the World Endurance Championship, Lamborghini are withdrawing for next season. but they're staying in IMSA, so that's interesting. We don't know who's going to be running the hypercar in IMSA. There's a potential of 2 hypercars in IMSA. So we'll see what happens with the Lamborghini program in the IMSA series, but we know they are withdrawing from the World Endurance Championship, which is a shame. But at the same time, they want to focus on one of the 2 series. They haven't had a great year in either series, if we're being honest. Having watched all of the IMSA series, yeah, Lamborghini, they had some good moments in the endurance side of things with the hypercar, considering it's a first year program. They actually led a couple of races at one point. It was a shame that they just didn't have the best debut season in IMSA. In the World Endurance Championship, that is a very expensive program to pull out of. So it's been a money pit for them, which is a shame because the premise was there. But the fact they're staying in IMSA is good. I enjoy the IMSA series more than the World Endurance Championship. I think some of their regulations are slightly better, personally. Again, that's a personal view. But we'll see what next season brings, because we know Aston Martin are also joining the IMSA paddock with the Valkyrie, which looks fantastic. The road car is fantastic, mental but fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to Aston Martin's introduction to the hypercar class. That adds a bit of spice. So they'll be a first year manufacturer. And it'd be interesting to see how quickly they get up to speed. But they've had a lot of testing for the Valkyrie, a lot of testing. They've used a lot of the road car testing as well for the aero and stuff. So they've already got a good basis to bring the race car on. Really looking forward to that. On the World Endurance Championship side of things, yeah, Toyota's dominance has come to an end, which is fantastic, because when Toyota just kept winning the championship, it was kind of a bit, here we go again. So it's a very lively and open field in the World Endurance Championship now, which I think is what that class of motor racing needed, personally. I know Toyota had a massive head start with their hypercar package over all the other manufacturers, but the fact it's now Ferrari are winning races, BMW are mixing it up, you've got all the various Porsche factory and client teams, good thing. So there's that. F1, still not interested in F1. I know that there are a lot of sports fans and motorsport fans who are, F1 fans over anything else. I've lost my fandom for F1. I do have in the memorabilia collection some books, but this is over 20. Some of these books are over 20 years old. So F1 has evolved so much. I'm no longer a fan of F1. I don't like how Liberty Media, the direction they're taking the sport in. I think that they're basically turning it into IndyCar, basically, and NASCAR, which is not necessarily the direction they should be taking it. They're basically pivoting to the American market. So they've Americanized it, and they've cost themselves a lot of rusted-on fans. Which is not good when you're pissing off your existing fan base to try and entice new fans. It says that you don't need to change the product, and they've changed the product. I understand some of the regulation changes that have been forced for safety, and that's fine. But when you completely change what the product is in such a short space of time, plus then you deny the hardcore fans of all socio-economic levels of easy access by putting it behind a paywall, that's exceptionally prohibitively expensive. Yeah, you're going to lose fans and you're going to lose viewers in your hardcore demographic. You're going to annoy your existing fan base for the potential for new fans that may or may not have interest in the sport in 5 years' time. If you're already pissing off your existing fan base and you're bleeding existing fans for the expense of getting new ones who may not stick around, with a lot of gimmicks like sprint races and changes to this and that and regulation changes, it's just that's sports that relying on gimmicks is in trouble. A sport that is relying on gimmicks is in trouble. And for me, I started to lose interest in F1 a good decade ago, if not more. And it's been waning for some time. This was even before Vettel and Hamilton had their period of Vettel's dominance, and then Hamilton's beginning of dominance. Even before then, I was gradually losing interest in the product. I think some of the circuits they go to are very antiseptic. Even the existing classic circuits have been modified so much that they don't resemble the circuits that I grew up with in the 90s and the 2000s. And some of the locations they're going to just really raise eyebrows about the integrity of the sport. Not that every country's got a great human rights record. Every country's got some skeletons in the closet. But when you're going to countries with some really diabolical human rights records because they're oil or gas rich, and they've got big state sponsors and they've got some money to throw around from their sovereign wealth funds, it's just like international football with the World Cup going to Qatar. Morals go out the window and integrity goes out the window for money and geopolitics. That's as political as I get on it and issues like this, but I have my views on it. And I understand the frustration a lot of fans have from a variety of socioeconomic and religious backgrounds or social backgrounds or whatever it may be, different stratas of society who are fans of a particular sport, but when they sell out to the big corps, look at the issues FIFA are facing with the Women's World Cup, with a big Aramco, one of the biggest companies from Saudi Arabia, sponsoring the tournament. The players aren't happy being associated with a sponsor from a country that has a really poor human rights record when it comes to women's rights. And that has to be taken into account. Yeah, I mean, we didn't see any major crowd issues in regards to the Qatar World Cup, but there were various sections of the fan base that were not happy with the tournament going there, who actually didn't watch or didn't go and didn't feel that they were able to participate freely and fairly without, infringing upon their personal beliefs. And that did marginalise a lot of people. I don't care what background you have or what religion you are or orientation sexually. I treat everyone equally, but when sections of a fan base feel marginalised because of a particular sponsor or a particular host country or whatever it may be, or a particular set of rules or regulations, then you've got a problem when you're marginalising a significant proportion of your fan base, of a team or a sport, because of a commercial decision, because you are chasing money, shows that that organisation has lost integrity. And F1 and FIFA are two big organisations, motorsport and association football, or soccer to those viewers around the world that from North America or Australia. Yeah, there's been some pushback, and while other host countries have also got their human rights issues in various sports, I mean, look, I know people are saying, well, back in the 60s and 70s, people weren't complaining when the Football World Cup went to Mexico and Argentina, when those countries were committing horrible human rights abuses with the military governments and military coups and brutality in the height of the Cold War. Yeah, FIFA went there because they were countries that leaned towards the non-aligned movement or the West. They were anti-communist. We did see political boycotts by countries at Olympics because of other countries' political or military actions or whatever it may be. And it did politicize sport. And we saw attempts made partly using soft power in politics with the Summit Series in ice hockey, for example, where NHL teams played against the Red Army national side, basically, in a series of games over a series of years in the mid-70s. And that was an attempt to ease tensions between the Soviet Union and the US and Canada, to mixed results. But you could say that they are remembered as iconic moments at a time when, hey, fingers were on nuclear buttons. So very similar to now. In regards to what's happening right now in the world of sport, we've got the conclusion of the Rugby League internationals. Well, about 6 hours' time they kick off. So late tomorrow morning for me, but later today for Australia and New Zealand. They're going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to New Zealand versus PNG. I actually think there could be the potential for an upset there, with PNG potentially upsetting New Zealand. I would think Stacey Jones as the new Kiwi head coach is under a lot of pressure, considering where they were last year under Michael Maguire to where they are now. And considering he was part of Michael Maguire's backroom staff with the New Zealand setup, that's quite interesting. And of course, Australia, New Zealand in the women's is going to be quite tasty as well. Considering last year New Zealand lost that first test, won the second one and won well. I'm going to be looking for a similar response from the New Zealand women against Australia in that reverse fixture tomorrow morning, my time, tomorrow evening, down under. Do you think? I don't think necessarily the US president elect is necessarily the one, but I do think at some point we have to have the discussion about readmitting Russia and Belarus back into international sporting fold. Sport can be a great way to be used as an intermediary and to heal some wounds. And to, as I say, back in the 70s, the US and Canada had the Summit Series with the NHL with Soviet Union at a time when there was a lot of political and military tension between East and West. We saw it with chess as well when a Western grandmaster went to China to play a Soviet grandmaster at chess in China with China sort of as a buffer. It was weird. I had to study it at school. I don't want to bring politics into it, but I think there could be some political maneuvering behind the scenes and discussions behind the scenes. But at the same time, the various international sporting bodies need to look at some point re-including Russia and Belarus into the sporting fold. But then again, look how long South Africa, for example, was barred from international competition because of their domestic policies within their own country that did not impact any other country around the world apart from domestically within South Africa under the former white minority rule before Nelson Mandela's release, the apartheid era. The international sporting world basically said, you're not allowed to participate. So there were some of those rebel tours where countries, sporting teams basically went, to hell with the international ban, we're going to go and play 3-match international or 5-match international test series in cricket or rugby union or whatever sport it was in South Africa, in spite of the sporting ban, as part of the sanctions against the South African government at the time. And that led to a lot of recriminations within cricket and rugby union, for example, because of those rebel tours and the players involved and the coaches involved. And it did divide opinion. Who needs to take the lead? What, FIFA, the IOC, the IIHF, the sport world, the AAAF? Oh no, the IAAF is the World International Amateur Athletics Federation. I think that's or the is it IAAF? Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, at some point, a sporting body is going to be brave and they're going to be readmitted. By where one sporting body is brave, others may follow. The big ones are World Rugby, FIFA, the IIHF. They're the big ones where even in rugby union, Russia's got a pretty decent domestic league system, decent pathways, and for a tier 2, tier 3 nation, has some decent centralized funding from the Kremlin. They have appeared at World Cup, so they're not like completely useless at the sport. They've had some top players play in Western Europe, so they it's not as if they're completely useless at the sport. But they've been out in the cold now for several years. They've even appeared in the Rugby League World Cup as well. So the sports where they're really good at, especially ice hockey, if the IIHF were to go, you're allowed back in, I think that may put some pressure on the IOC because it's more that it's basically certain that the NHL players will be going to the Olympics. And so that completely changes the dynamic because some of the better Russian players play in the NHL. And if the NHL has agreed with the IIHF as an intermediary and the IOC to allow player participation, that changes things, and that will put pressure on the readmission of Russia because sports fans, we want to see the best players, and the Russians are their best international sport. at a team level, where there are world championships and there are Olympic participation, is ice hockey. They're pretty decent at football, we know that, but ice hockey is a big one. Well, basketball, there's a lot of Eastern European players that are obviously either have been based in Russia, or coaches or players that are in the Russian sphere of things. It's very popular in Eastern Europe, especially Serbia and Croatia. Basketball is very, very popular. Serbia is mad. And there's a fair few Russian players or Russian-based players, and sport's very popular actually in Russia itself. And FIBA gets a fair bit of money, membership fees from member states. So to lose the Russian investment at a grassroots level and funding level is actually quite a problem, because it is quite a popular sport with many registered players. It's quite popular at Russian university and high school level, because they don't really have a lot of playing fields, because it snows a lot in Russia, so you need a lot of indoor sports. So ice hockey and basketball are exceptionally popular. They have a lot of facilities, and there's a lot of state funding. So to lose the Russian money from that organisation hurts. It hurts a lot. Now, while a lot of Russian players may not be of NBA standard, we don't have many Russian players in the NBA. I don't think we have any. But on an international standpoint of basketball as a sport, which is not the biggest sport internationally, let's be honest, it's not as big as some other international sports for TV viewership and participation at the elite level. When you block a nation like Russia, and Belarus for that matter, where it's also a very popular indoor sport, again, weather conditions mean you can't really play outside. When a regular basketball season would take place, or any regular sport, you have to play inside, and they have the facilities for it. That means you lose revenue. You lose sponsors, so the big gas and oil companies. You lose exposure, because it's a very popular sport that fans watch and consume, because you block the media rights. You lose that, and when you lose some of the biggest teams in Europe are based out of the former Soviet Union, especially in Russia. Yeah, you lose those gate receipts when they are the visiting team, because that's going to pique the interest of fans. The viewership on TV. If it's a known sporting brand or a sports club, you lose that revenue. Because a percentage of receipts will go to the governing body. And the other teams from the other leagues that play in the Euro League, for example, and play in these transcontinental competitions, it doesn't matter if it's UEFA or the IIHF or FIBA, for example, when you have these organised club competitions, these transcontinental club competitions and international tournaments, and you don't have the Russian and Belarusian teams there, especially with ice hockey and basketball, and to a certain extent football, they do generate a fair bit of revenue. They have some history within the sport. They have sizable fan bases that do travel well, where the fans will spend money, and also at home. You lose those gate receipts, you lose that sponsorship money, you lose that TV audience and internet audience, or the media audience, those that aren't at the game but are watching online or on TV. That hurts revenue. And when you have less revenue, it puts pressure on an organisation to find a solution. Now, there's a cost of living crisis, so you can't really go to the other fans of the other nations and the other teams that are allowed to participate. Oh, we're going to hike your prices up because we lost the gate receipts from a CSK Moscow. You can't just go, okay, Dinamo Riga, we're going to have to increase your ticket prices by 15% for a CHL game or a Eurobasket game. We're going to have to. I'm just using Dinamo Riga as an example, because I know they have an ice hockey team. I don't know if they've got a basketball team, but I know they've got an ice hockey team. Oh, we're going to have to increase. Or Jokerit. There's another one that's played in the KHL and played in the CHL. CHL is the Continental Hockey League, which is ice hockey's equivalent of the Champions League and Europa League in football. So when those games are played, we're going to have to raise the prices to mitigate the loss of the Russian teams from participation. It's not going to sit well with the fan base at a time when costs are already going up, you're probably going to mean more fans stay away, more empty seats. Empty seats are really bad for media broadcasts, for the domestic audience and international audience when you're trying to sell an international TV package. Not a good look. I don't want to get too stuck on Russian and Belarusian international participation and their domestic club teams being allowed to participate in transcontinental competitions like the Champions League or Eurobasket or CHL, for example. But at some point, we are going to see commercial pressure because of the lost revenues or reduced revenues or lesser profits being applied to sporting governing bodies because they're losing revenue here or potential revenue. They could make more money, basically. I could definitely see some economic pressure being added. But we'll see what happens. We don't know what's going to happen next year. We'll see if a sporting governing body like FIBA or the IOC or the IIHF, these are the ones where Russia has a big say. If they decide to go, yeah, cool, we're going to have a vote on readmitting the Russian teams back into competition, that changes things. But a lot of national governments are still very hard line on regards to sanctions of Russia, and that includes sport. Sport is seen as a soft power sanction. It worked with South Africa. It actually hurts South Africa's public image because South Africa, obviously, cricket and rugby union, they are world class. Even football, for African standards, they've got a great history and actually produce some pretty good players. So it actually hurt them really badly. And then at the time they had this sporting sanction in place, they had some of the best players in the world in those three sports who was not unknown outside of South Africa. And then in the early 90s, we saw some of the best African teams we've ever seen take to the field and win World Cups and get high rankings and win Africa Cup of Nations and do things we didn't know they were capable of because we hadn't seen those players play. Yes and no. It means a lot more games. So while it might be creating some interesting matchups and some interesting results in the groups, the weird league group stage, we'll see what happens at the end of the season and how shattered the players are when we come to FA Cup finals, League Cup finals, and the domestic cup finals across Europe, and then also the European finals as well when we get to the Champions League final, the Europa League final, the Conference League final. Last season, with the old format, the players looked out on their feet. Players looked shattered. The Euros, obviously, we just had in Germany, was not, for my opinion, the best football we've seen. I feel the 2014 World Cup and the 2018 World Cup, and even the delayed 2020 Euros, partly because of that delay and all those breaks that we had with COVID restrictions. I will say this, the players in the last 12 to 24 months, when it comes to end of season and cup final, players look absolutely out on their feet. So while it might have had a little first season bounce with the format, from what I can gather, a lot of fans don't actually like it, and a lot of players don't like it. And player feedback is key because they're the ones who've got to play the extra games. They're the ones who've got to perform with this really congested calendar. And a lot of the players, I think every single player who's come out and complained about the amount of fixture congestion there is now injured, some of them for the season. So let that sink in, the irony of that. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see what the quarterfinal stage onwards looks like. Because if we're having the same teams make up the majority of the knockout stages, it hasn't worked as a format. In fact, if anything, it's ensured those European Super League clubs that wanted a European Super League are still going to be there. If they're not there, then yes, it's worked. If those teams are there, so your Real Madrids, your Barcelonas, Man United aren't in the Champions League, but those clubs that signed up for the European Super League, if they're all the clubs that make out the quarterfinal stage, plus the other clubs they wanted to invite, then it hasn't worked as a format, and if anything, is pointless because you've just summed up what the European Super League would have been about. And if it damages domestic games, which it already has, domestic leagues, because we've lost replays, and a lot of fans are already pissed at the FA for scrapping replays in round 1 and round 2 and round 3, because it hurts the smaller clubs from the non-league or the lower leagues, then we're seeing an erosion of the domestic game to suit a handful of clubs in Europe in the transcontinental competition. And if anything, it doesn't benefit the game as a whole, it benefits a few. So my view on when I did the Deportivo La Coruña history, I basically threw shade at Barcelona and Real Madrid. I don't actually think those clubs and their antics are good for the game, and their dominance of Spanish football is good for the game. The sport existed before they came along and will exist after they don't go bankrupt because they have state backing by dodgy stadium deals where they can get around financial fair play with loopholes and bribe referees while they're at it, and have toxic fan bases and toxic club presidents and some very dodgy dealings. Football, ironically, Real Madrid and Barcelona, while they've got massive international fan bases and they do generate a lot of income for the game, in my personal opinion, they're not actually good for the sport. The fact that Barcelona have got a deal from Nike that's worth that much, it's still, it might pay off the debt. It doesn't service the interest that they have. Plus, they've just basically, they're one quarter of the way of rebuilding the new camp, which is basically not progressing as quick as they would like, and is scaffolding. That just clears the debt they have, doesn't service the interest on it. If that was a one-off payment, that clears their debt. Fine, they can register players, but they're spending nearly that amount of money on the stadium, so it doesn't really do much. And they want to have a stadium over 100,000. Honestly, how many of those fans in there are actually going to be Barcelona fans from Barcelona? Or how many of them are going to be, Instagram tourists? The plastics. I'm interested in look, my club. I don't live near my team. I admit that. I am a little bit of a faraway fan, but I fell in love with Blackburn before they won the Premier League, so let that sink in. But I wonder how many of those Barcelona fans are actually from Catalonia and Barcelona, and actually watch the game without putting it on their Instagram feed or stream it on YouTube while they're in the stadium or put it on their Facebook. Look, I'm at the new. Because in my opinion, like a lot of fans are basically don't like the new camp. And are not fans of the aesthetics and the inside and whatever. Same with the Bernabeu. How many of those Real Madrid fans are actually Madrid fans? Because the Real Madrid fan base historically is the upper middle class of Madrid. So there can't be that many wealthy people in Madrid, considering the average Spanish salary is not great. Spain is not a wealthy country in regards to the other developed economies in Western Europe. I'm just putting it out there. Yeah, how many of those Real Madrid and Barcelona fans are actually local? Without the what I call the tourists, they're not got as big a fan base as they think, but they have got special relationships with the state, be it regional or national, that bail them out of trouble, which is why they're allowed to have debts as big as they've got, which is ridiculous because other clubs with maybe bigger fan bases, potentially playing maybe bigger cities, would have definitely gone into administration, bankruptcy, liquidation, and gone bust. So, what may be good for Barcelona and Real Madrid is not necessarily good for football. I'm gonna pass judgment on the Champions League format when at the end of the season, how buggered are the players and what quality football we see in the various latter stages of the domestic cups when we get to the European finals at the end of May, beginning of June. If the pace of the game is like walking pace in the European finals and the FA Cup final, League Cup final, we know that they've got the fixturing wrong. And I hate the term load management. I really do, because whenever I listen to player interviews And we're talking about how many games should a player be allowed to play in a variety of sports. For the most part, players want to play as many games as possible. Personally, firstly, you've got the club records. You want to break appearance records. You want to have your Iron Man streaks because you get appearance bonuses. It's in contracts. So some of it's financially motivated. Others, it's just an achievement. You want to go, right, I aim to have X amount of games played by this point in my career. I want to set that as an achievable goal just for personal development. But there might be a financial incentive, appearance bonuses. What Man United? I think Man United's. This is where it comes down to branding, unless it's the new. Yeah, but Celtic, I don't think will get to the knockout stage because they are abysmal. Let's not kid ourselves. The quality of Scottish football is abysmal. Let's be honest. The national side isn't setting the world on fire, and their club sides in Europe get hammered everywhere they go. I can't see Celtic and Rangers and Leipzig. Yeah, Leipzig. What have they really done in German football apart from basically buy the lower leagues and then actually they get to the Bundesliga and they haven't won a Bundesliga title yet? When Leipzig actually win a Bundesliga title, then I'll start taking notice. Yeah, but actually look at some of the results they've had in Europe when they've actually, had a supposedly weaker group. We'll see what happens when we come to the end of this round robin league over complicated, pointless format. I don't look. Personally, I want it to go back to straight knockouts. Less is more sometimes. But again, less is more. But UEFA think more is more. And when you're actually damaging the product you can have too much of a good thing. Man United. I mean, look, there's going to come a point where if Ruben Amorim can't turn things around, and they are below mid-table, and I mean, look, he's got a 3-year deal, nearly a 3-year deal. If he can't turn things around, and they're below mid-table come end of season, potentially in a relegation scrap, because we'll see. If next season Man United are still not achieving what they need to achieve and being competitive at top 4, top 5, then we have big problems. And a lot of questions are being asked of Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the direction he wants to take the club and the potential of the new stadium or refurbing Old Trafford. And some of the cost-cutting measures are concerning, and the fact that the club has made losses for 3 straight years shows that actually that they became too reliant on the Champions League and Europa League money. They became too reliant on European football basically to sustain their overspend because they basically overpaid for players. Their scouting's a mess. They have no direction. They have no style. Their youth system isn't functioning effectively in the same way it was 20, 30 years ago. So we'll see what happens. Same with Juve, Milan, Inter in Italy, and Bayern and Dortmund. Well, Bayer Leverkusen are changing that. Atalanta have had a bit to say. Napoli have had a bit to say in regards to Italian football. Roma and Lazio have at times as well. So it's not always the Juve show. But what is interesting is I've done a lot of the Italian clubs' histories. And it's very interesting. A lot of clubs have won the Scudetto. And in Germany, a lot of clubs have won the Bundesliga as well. So, and have won other silverware. So that's a stereotype that while in recent decades, yes, those clubs have been the dominant forces and won the majority of silverware, they haven't won all the silverware. So That's one of the reasons why I started doing the club history series, was to debunk a lot of the stereotypes and a lot of the myths that only certain clubs win trophies and that other clubs have had no success or can't win. Leipzig have won a couple of German Cups. Yeah, there are views on Red Bull's involvement in football as an ownership group or as a minority stake. Leeds, they will never be able to call them Red Bull Leeds, for example. They're not allowed, I think, to have a controlling stake. But it does show that the majority stakeholders, who are the same people who own the 49ers, they, in all their sports teams, they've actually looking for minority investors. They're running out of money. So the people who own the 49ers, who have the majority stake in Leeds, all their sports teams, they've sold minority stakes to other interested parties. Yeah, that speaks of we have run out of money issue. We're wealthy, but we're not willing to spend any more money, because that will put our other assets at risk financially. So interesting that Leeds end up with Red Bull, but how long Red Bull stick around with Leeds United if Leeds continue to not re-establish themselves in the Premier League? It'll be interesting if they stick around. My thoughts on the Rugby League Ashes returning, whether it's Great Britain or England, it doesn't really bother me. But as we've seen with all the England internationals in recent years, it's got to be in free-to-air coverage. If the RFL have a brain, which they've proven they haven't, but if they do, if there's someone who has a brain, all internationals need to be on free-to-air coverage. We haven't played Australia in a real long time, and honestly, I would. It'd be interesting to see who ends up broadcasting those games and what stadiums end up hosting the matches, and how they promote it. Because look, I know I missed the second England Samoa test, but going back to 2018 when England played New Zealand, all those years ago, mine. And I watched all three tests. What I found really shocking was none of the games were sold out, empty seats all over the place. And that was pre-COVID. And this is the same year we had the lowest attendance, I believe. Was it 2019 we had the lowest attendance at the Challenge Cup? I think we had the lowest ever post-war attendance for a Challenge Cup final in the same period. So there's been some issues with attendance. Now, obviously, rugby league in this country, with the Super League and IMG and the grading system and the future of several clubs next season in doubt, we know Toulouse are not playing in the Challenge Cup. They are boycotting because they'll basically be charged money to enter. So they won't make any money on the Challenge Cup this coming season. So they basically say, we're not paying the entrance fee, while the English-based clubs pay less of an entrance fee or don't have to pay. I think that was a real stupid move by the RFL. Basically, you're financially excluding a team from participating. Well done. The only reason why Catalans do pay the entrance fee is they can afford it. We know Newcastle Thunder and London Broncos may cease. And London Broncos may both pull out of professional rugby league. London Broncos may cease to exist. Newcastle Thunder and Cornwall, for example, are lucky. They also may cease to exist. So, real great job by the RFL growing the game in non-traditional locations and actually trying to grow the fan base and grow the product. And what I've seen is some gatekeeping fans who just want to keep it in the northern M62 corridor, saying the game cannot work in anywhere apart from the traditional locations because they don't want to try. And those that have tried have either made some real brain dead commercial decisions where they either choose a stadium partner or sponsors or whatever. But that just shows that the RFL is doing a real shit job of growing the game in this country and in France. And IMG, the grading, I mean, I don't know how they've come up with some of the grades, honestly. I really don't, because it's forcing clubs to spend money they haven't actually got. And some clubs have played the grading system to have a real shit season because they know they can't get relegated because they're going to be classed as grade A or a high grade B. And yeah, it's Hull FC. That new kit is diabolical. I'm sorry, that's not the whole club colours. They've gone, PSG, do you mind if we borrow your old kit from 1995? Oh, you don't mind? Fantastic, because we can't be asked to just slightly redesign the striping on our black and white kit. We're going to go for the Paris Saint-Germain colours, because why not? The Lee Leopards. Firstly, there was nothing wrong with Lee Centurions. Secondly, Derek Beaumont has got a hard-on for Hull FC and whinging about the grading system. Now, yes, I completely agree the grading system is broken, doesn't work, it's not actually helping the game. It's basically designed to protect a handful of big clubs because Super League has its best friends in Wigan and St Helens and Leeds. But don't. But Derek Beaumont, to me, he needs to lay off the sauce. He needs to lay off the Colombian powder because he comes up with some utter bollocks. His obsession with Hull FC is bananas. Their new kit looks even more disgusting than the last one. Yes, are people talking about it? No. There was no need to rebrand Lee Centurions because Lee Centurions works. Lee Leopards, it just looks like a middle-aged prostitute from a council estate in Sheffield. Has tightened herself up with the leopard print bloody jacket and it's cringe. It's cringe. I'm not. I know I shouldn't rant. I know they want a Challenge Cup, and the fortunes of the club is different with his funding, but you didn't have to rebrand. You just. Oh, we look too much like Wigan. No. You just don't have a very good team because you haven't spent any money for 20 years. Oh look, I'm not a look. I have my concerns on Red Bull and their ownership model going against, sporting culture and tradition, and they don't care if they ruffle feathers as long as their branding's better than Monster or better than Relentless or better than any other energy drinks company. As long as they're beating their rivals and but they're more expensive, they don't taste as nice, and they're not as good for you. But yeah, there's a lot of sports fans and a lot of leagues that don't like Red Bull and have actually, since they've started buying up these sports teams and adding them to the Red Bull umbrella, have turned their backs on the product. It was actually hurting them, which is one of the reasons why they've got to keep increasing their prices, is they've got to fund these sports purchases. It's basically a branding exercise. It's corporate advertising at its worst, in a way. And it does go against the cultures and traditions of a lot of sports, and it does alienate a lot of fans. And look, I mean, I've got nothing against a wealthy industrialist. I forget the guy who set up Red Bull. He's passed away now, but his family still has a big stake in the company. He passed away a couple of years ago. I've got nothing against a wealthy individual or someone of that nature wanting to invest in sport. More the merrier. And at the same time, it just doesn't sit right with me. And I don't know. I hope that it's just a sponsorship stake, and as soon as a better deal comes along for the Leeds United owners, that they can sell I think ownership rules prohibit, and the rules of English football prohibit it being called Red Bull Leeds, for example. I think the current ownership rules would prohibit that. And look what happened with MK Dons when they tried to Americanise and they moved Wimbledon. That went really well, didn't it? And Leeds, a very historically successful club, big fan base. A lot of the Leeds fans are happy that it brings a bit more financial investment and it brings a bit more financial stability. That's great. But I think if they were to try and rebrand completely, I think there would be a riot in Yorkshire on our hands. On my views on Red Bull, I have to be careful because obviously when I get to Red Bull Leipzig and RB Leipzig and RB Salzburg in the football club history videos, and I will do videos on both clubs. There's going to be sections where I do discuss, the Red Bull ownership and the pros and cons of it, and how it goes against the traditional ownership model and the sporting culture of both countries, because they're very similar in Germany and Austria, and how they are the most despised club ownership group in both countries, with the majority of fans. And they've had legal challenges, and they've been sued, and they've had legal challenges, and a lot of fans have shunned them, especially when it comes to supporting the international teams at international tournaments. Fans of those clubs are shunned by the rest of the supporters group. There really is. They are pariahs. They're not fondly thought of domestically. And the fact that Jurgen Klopp has now gone to work for the Red Bull Group in their, I think, is it a talent development or pro scouting department. Jurgen Klopp has gone in I forget what role he's been given, but he's something to do with player development or player scouting. He's gone to work in a role for the Red Bull Group. A lot of people at Dortmund a lot of fans at Dortmund have reacted very angrily to Klopp's appointment with the Red Bull Group and working for RB Leipzig, basically. A lot of Borussia Dortmund fans and other German football fans who had a fond respect and fond memories of Jurgen Klopp when he was in the Bundesliga have reacted very negatively to his appointment by the RB Sports division. Magic Weekend's going back to Newcastle. I think that was a logical decision. When the RFL came out and said Magic Weekend was a success, when it was the second lowest attendance they've ever had, and fans panned the move to Leeds, tells you all you need to know with the RFL. They're not reading the room. They're not reading the room. I don't think the RFL... I can see some rugby league clubs breaking away from the RFL. I could see what happened in Australia in the mid-90s happening here, except that the sport here has less money than it does in Australia. The reason why we have Super League was to stop Wigan going bust. Wigan basically signed up all the top talent, which is why they dominated the Challenge Cup for forever, and the old Rugby League Division 1 forever. And they were the only true professional full-time team, and they couldn't sustain themselves because no other team could match the quality, and couldn't recruit better players, so they were limited in what they could recruit coming from Australia and New Zealand with the overseas allowance. And so they basically made it a one-team league, and they couldn't sustain their level of spending because other teams were just like, well, we can't compete with them. And the Super League came about partly to stop Wigan going bust because they were the biggest club in the game, but they did it at such a ruinous cost to themselves and to the sport as a whole that Sky came along and ruined it some more. Thank you, Murdoch. So basically, it's basically what happened in Australia. They came up with this idea of the Super League, and you had Murdoch on one side and the Packer family on the other. And some of the salaries they were giving out were ridiculous for the time. And by today's money, they would be obscene by rugby league standards. Football standards, or soccer, depending on where you're watching in the world, they will be pretty standard contracts. But by rugby league standards then, and if you were to add inflation and exchange rate and all sorts now, some of those contracts would be ruinous for the clubs now. They wouldn't be salary cap compliant, let's just say that. And some clubs actually ended up in financial difficulties and owed players money. The North Sydney Bears, for example, owed players money when they merged with Manly and when they separated from Manly. There were players owed money who weren't picked up by the Northern Eagles, basically, who were cast aside. There were players owed money. And I was listening to a podcast interview. I forget the player's name. He ended up playing over here for a bit. For St Helens, he played for Newcastle as well, for nothing, on just an appearance fee. But he was a Northern Bear, North Sydney Bear, and they did the merger following the Super League with the Manly Sea Eagles, which became the Northern Eagles. He was not one of the players selected to join the merger, or was it when the club split apart? I can't remember. It was either for the merger or after the merger ended. He was not retained, and they owe him money from the Super League era when he signed his contract. He was owed money, and in the end, he had to settle for a percentage of what he was owed. So he actually lost money. Yeah, the Super League initially did do quite well in the early years, but at the same time, they made some really poor decisions for a variety of reasons, and some club chairmen didn't help with some of the decisions they took. But in reality, the TV deals actually held the game hostage. The Sky TV money, ironically, has held the sport hostage to a point where Sky can just go, we'll pay you this much this year, and there's nothing you can do about it because you need us more than we. So basically, Sky TV, Sky Sports basically goes to rugby league, you need us more than we need you. And that's basically the position the RFL finds itself in. Is it's got one hand tied around its balls and the other hand tied around its back. And there's a couple of strings on each hand, and they're trying to pull this arm out of its socket, and they're trying to rip your bollocks off with the other hand tied around it. Sky have rugby league in a death grapple. They can basically say the TV deal's worth £1 next year, and because they have a big audience, as does the BBC, but the BBC can only pay so much because it's a public broadcaster. Sky can basically go, yeah, here's £1. What are you going to do about it? You need a broadcaster. We're the only ones willing to pay the broadcast money. There you go, here's £1. And the Super League is buggered. The RFL is buggered. They have to go, otherwise they've only got 15 club games on the BBC, plus Challenge Cup and internationals. So all in all, let's say 20 games, 25 games in total a year on free-to-air. In total, over 9 months. Whereas Sky has every game can be broadcast from Sky. They can charge whatever they want. They have the grand final. They have all the finals matches apart from, I think, 2 of them. They can charge what they want. They could say to the Super League and the RFL, your deal's worth £1. And the RFL is not in a position to really say, we're going to refuse that, because the BBC and or any other free-to-air broadcaster, so let's say Channel 4 or ITV or Channel 5 or Quest or whoever it may be that comes along and wants to negotiate as a free-to-air broadcaster, doesn't have the same backing as a media group. ITV potentially, because it's on the stock exchange, and could do a share sale to raise revenue. And it does have a subscription premium and ITVX standard premium, you pay for no ads. So ITV potentially as the only free-to-air broadcaster that could potentially have a bit of financial clout to go, here's some money, which is more than what the BBC would have negotiated with BBC Prime Commercial, whatever. Sky basically have rugby league over a barrel. It's a pretty nasty situation. They've got the RFL have got their basically would be in a torture rack, medieval torture rack, having horrible things done to them. And Sky know this. The TV deal has halved in value in 3 years. This is what happens when you get a public ad-free broadcaster like the BBC to replace Channel 4, which is partly publicly funded through the TV license, partly commercial with the ad revenue. This is what happens when you have a really weak negotiation that suits the broadcasters over the product. The broadcasters, whoever was negotiating on the BBC's behalf and Sky's behalf, laughing all the way at the bank. They're laughing. They've spent less money to acquire the rights than the previous broadcast deal. And it is embarrassing. Whoever signed that deal at the RFL commercial side of things should be sacked. Done. Gone. Bye. That is an embarrassing deal that's been signed. Whoever signed off on that, their superior, sack them as well. And someone, in my personal opinion, I think the whole board should go. The chairman should go. And bin off IMG while you're at it, because that's costing the RFL money. It's not actually helping the game personally, but it's forcing clubs that don't have money, that are making losses, to spend more money whilst not making a profit to become Grade A or Grade B compliant for making a 14-team Super League, which should be the case. Get Luke fixtures no one wants. Get rid of that. Bin that off. 14-team Super League, so you might actually keep Toulouse and London Broncos going as clubs. That'd be an idea. Trying to grow in non-traditional locations in England and traditionally in France, be a good idea. No brainer, really. Plus, you have 2 extra teams in the league, which means you have more teams to broadcast, which means your TV deal's worth more money. There you go. You get more money. You have more fixtures. You have more revenue. It's brain dead. How can the NRL be expanding, but the Super League basically has gone, teams are going bust. We'll grade them. We'll force them to spend money they haven't got to reach certain. We're basing off social media. Really? Yeah. Sky Sports, as I say, they can turn the taps off and it will kill rugby league stone dead. The sport will survive as an amateur going concern, but professionally they can kill it like that. We saw what happened with the Super League war, where contracts were given out. It divided the fandom, it divided communities, because it's a very big community game in rural Australia, in Queensland and New South Wales. Even in Western Australia and Northern Territory, there are teams in the bush, in the outback, small towns, small mining communities, small villages, small town Australia. The Super League was really damaged rugby league. It's taken a long time. And there was a period where the game contracted in Australia and grew here. A very small period. It took a long time for the NRL to bounce back. We could sustain a 20-team NRL, and I think that's what's going to happen. We have had a 20-team NRL before. There now is money in the game that wasn't there in the 90s, which is why we saw these mergers and why they've turned down the team going to Perth. Well done, because I think that's really damaged the potential for growth in Western Australia, and I think we potentially pissed off a lot of casual fans or even fans who live in Perth, because Perth is a rapidly growing city. A lot of Australians have relocated from the traditional heartlands to Perth. So you've got rusted-on fans there, plus the potential for new fans. You've got a thriving state league. You potentially have alienated 1.2 million people. Well done, ARL. Well done. Well done, Volandis, you prick. Now, the South Island and New Zealand have come along, and they've put forward their proposal for the 18th team, which I think is a very strong proposal and very likely a very good proposal to have a second team in New Zealand. Considering the amount of talent that basically is eligible to represent New Zealand in the men's game and the women's game, and it's an untapped potential. Although, admittedly, the majority of New Zealanders, Kiwis, live in the North Island, especially in Auckland and Wellington. But Christchurch, Dunedin, it can work. I've got no doubt on that. Hamilton, it can work. We know that their proposal has been submitted. They've got some real big names in rugby league admin and involved, and rugby league sponsorship involved. They've got some big names that Aussies and Kiwis would know. I know a little bit about a couple of the people involved in the South Island bid, but not enough to really discuss in depth. But yeah, the Bears bid was they've been pushing hard for a good decade, and I think the NRL have missed a golden opportunity either to have them on the Central Coast or in Perth, and I think they potentially alienated a lot of existing and potential new fans. Will it have helped the Union survive? The Western Force have never been a really great side. They haven't really been a top side in Super Rugby. They've been solid at times, but they've had their financial struggles. And what we've seen with Melbourne, with the Rebels, shows the state that rugby union is in Australia. It's not in a good state. And again, rugby union in general is not in a good state. It's not too many rule changes, too many reactionary rule changes, not enough consideration just given to player welfare, in the sense that just players going for an HIA, even if he passes, I don't think they should be allowed back on the field. If they fail, a lengthier stand down period in between returning to training. And a lot more in regards to player welfare off the field, in regards to, okay, you've gone for an HIA, you may pass, okay, you can be eligible for your next game. But at least have a minimum stand down period from training, just rest the body up a little bit, and observation for, let's say, 48 to 72 hours. Makes logical sense when you've had a bit of a bash to the head. Just make sure you might have delayed symptoms there. If after that period you still haven't had any symptoms, cool, return to training, play the next game. If they fail, I think they need to have longer mandatory stand down periods, 2 to 3 weeks minimum, I think would be a good way to go. Guess what? You're probably prolonging their lives and fuck their careers. Prolonging their lives would be a starting point. You don't have to change tackle heights. Technique has got bad because coaches and the governing body allowed technique to get bad because they were not properly punishing players with lengthy suspensions for dirty or bad technique. Dirty play and bad technique, simple as. Reactionary rule changes, which is what we see in rugby league and rugby union, do more to damage the sport than a guy. A straight arm is a straight arm. Bring back the biff, by the way, honestly. But also proper lengthy suspensions for players, and stop tinkering with, yellow upgrade to red. If it's deemed a red, send the player off. Send him off. A straight head high shot always was a red card. It was never a yellow. It was always a straight send off. Doesn't matter what code. So where we got to the point where it's only 10 the bin, or it's a penalty, or it's on report, a straight arm headshot was always, you're gone, bye-bye, that's your game over. It's foul play. Doesn't matter if you mistimed it or if you deliberately aimed to decapitate the guy. The tackle technique has got bad for a good 20, 25 years. And a lot of that's coached. And where's the criticism of the coaches in this? The tackle coaches, the defense coaches? There is none. So this is why I don't like these reactionary rule changes, because the game has allowed poor governance and weak enforcement of the rules to creep in. Bad tackle technique has crept in over a long time, which has been allowed because the coaches have been allowed to coach it from a very young age. And being a slightly smaller player and a quicker player isn't rewarded anymore. And also dominant low leg tackles are not rewarded as well. In both codes. Reward dominant tackle. Reward it. They're not. So you get players trying to smash them too high. Wasps, Irish and Worcester supposed to be returning to the Championship next season. Yeah, but, they were allowed. They need to change the administration rules in rugby union to similar to football, because people have lost their jobs. Not just players, admin staff, club shop, stadium staff. People have lost their jobs. Whereas when it comes to football or rugby league, when it go into administration, the rules are different, which allow the club to function day to day. So guess what? You can still get some money in through gate receipts by playing games, so staff can get paid. We need a strong players union as well, which is we don't have that, because great, they're playing in the Championship. By the way, because they're probably going to get readmitted to the Premiership by not actually, promotion relegation, because rugby union and rugby league basically fuck themselves, because reasons. It's true. You've got to have certain criteria. Stop this. It needs to be on sporting merit. That was the whole point of our sporting system. We are Americanizing everything. Oh, social media clicks. Great. London Irish have got a solid fan base. I think the stadium deal they have with Brentford, moving closer to London, great idea. Wasn't as beneficial financially for them than the Medeski deal they had. But again, changing ownership at Reading Football Club, they didn't renew that deal. Brentford were like, we'll have you as an anchor tenant. We'll have you as a secondary tenant at our new stadium because we need to pay the stadium off and we need to stabilise in the Premier League. We need extra revenue. Come along. Of course, the COVID loans ran out and it killed them. Worcester were struggling pre-COVID. Wasps were struggling pre-COVID. London Irish, it just collapsed. Again, Wasps moving to Coventry killed them. it was doomed to fail, and they were spending money they didn't have. And that deal also impacted another sports team, Coventry City, who the other day sacked their manager. So, great, they're going in the Championship, which basically also means they'll be back in the Premiership sooner rather than later, and then they'll make it a closed shop again. When they're allowed back in, other clubs that have done the hard work on and off the field in the Championship on that aspiration with promotion relegation, which they've had up to this point, are going to be denied that. So it becomes a select group of clubs that are in the Premiership because they meet certain criteria, even though attendances are down at a lot of clubs. Attendances are down. I think they should play again at the Brentford Community Stadium where they were playing before. I wouldn't play at Reading because the uncertainty around Reading is there. I know they had a good relationship with Medeski and previous Reading ownership, and they had a good working relationship at the stadium and all that. But the current uncertainty surrounding Reading Football Club is a concern. But there's also talk about merging the URC with the Premiership and having Welsh and Scottish clubs and all that. But yeah, I mean, look, the RFU and the Premiership brought in these stadium criteria where it's got to be a minimum size. Clubs right now aren't selling out their stadiums. Clubs right now are struggling for attendance. So it's that criteria is BS, because if you can't fill your stadium, that's got to be a certain criteria, and you actually drop below the criteria threshold for what stadium size should be, you've got a problem. Surely the club should be there on merit and need to be financially viable. And in years gone by, Bath would have been relegated. As things are going right now, Exeter would be in a relegation scrap. Newcastle, it would have gone down. Clubs are being allowed to exist and being rewarded for failing in the short term, but in the long term, it actually hurts them more because fans are staying away. Ticket prices have to go up to mitigate fans staying away, which then prices out other fans that otherwise would have gone in a cost of living crisis. Well done. And the TV deal sucks. So rugby union's doing the same as what rugby league has done, and football to a certain extent at various clubs in various areas of the country and parts of the world. It's a revolving cycle. They really, when times were good, they milked the fans badly. And they didn't save for a rainy day. They were spending money like it was going out of fashion. Now times are hard financially. They can't milk the fans anymore because it leads to fans not turning up. Certain teams, Leicester and Saracens, for example, financial rules don't apply to them. Other teams obviously were struggling either before COVID or during COVID. A lot of clubs don't own their own stadiums, so they're leasing stadium time from a football club or a rugby league club. Just as an example, they don't own their stadium. And so that's another expense. And players are getting paid more now than they were before. And players are expecting those contracts. And the contracts that we have are not sustainable because the top end talent getting paid too much. And I go back to this, and I've been going back to this for 5 years. Augustine Pichot, before COVID, in that World Rugby election, following the 2019 World Cup, said this would happen. Not in England, but it would happen, that clubs will go out of business, that the wage disparity at teams between the top talent and the lower paid talent was unsustainable because players in the middle would expect a higher contract. The game was spending money that it hadn't saved. It was earning money, but actually was losing money. It hadn't saved the money from the good times before the financial crash in the 90s and the 2000s when the game first went professional. It had spent basically the money it should save for a rainy day. Lo and behold, Bill Beaumont wins, so you get the same old status quo, no radical change. And then suddenly rugby is trying to impose the changes that Pichot said should have been in place anyway. Yeah. Oh, and Welsh rugby teams wouldn't meet the Premiership rugby stadium standards. None of the Welsh teams, I think Cardiff are the only team that meet that own their own stadium. The other teams either are anchor tenants or share their stadium. So Ospreys and the Dragons share with football clubs, and I think the Scarlets and the Blues, for example, okay, they are the only tenants I think at their stadiums, but their attendances are shocking. I think Cardiff had the best attendance out of the four. Their attendances are shocking, and Wales doesn't have a lot of money. Let's be honest. Wales, the average incomes are a lot less. Disposable incomes are a lot less. Cost of living's cheaper. I'll give it that, but there's less money in people's pockets to spend to go to games. And if you were to bring the Welsh clubs and have a combined league or a URC combined, look, the Irish clubs do well. There's a reason for that. They're well run, the Irish provinces. Having the South African teams has brought a different element to the URC. The Italian teams have massively improved from where they were and are starting to make money. Scotland, we could argue, with their limited professional player base, okay, and with only two fully professional teams, there's question marks over why that is and why Wales, with a smaller population, has more professional teams. There is that question. But the Welsh teams are losing. The Welsh Union's broke. Rugby Union in Wales is broke. Has been in financial difficulty for many, many years, long before this channel existed. 2 decades it's been buggered financially. It's been buggered financially since the late 90s, early 2000s when the game turned professional. The game just couldn't financially sustain it. And some of the in regards to the agreement with the Ospreys and playing at the Liberty and their situation financially, all 4 of the Welsh regions are buggered. By dropping the place names and just having Reds or Scarlets, Ospreys, Blues, and Dragons, you have a disconnect with the local community when you're trying to build a fan base. And then below that, you've got the Welsh Premier, which is, by the way, a joke. And then you've got the doping issue and recreational drug issue, which is really bad with Welsh players, Welsh-based players. There was a documentary, it's just a while ago now, this documentary aired. I think it was on Inside Out, BBC kind of version of Panorama kind of thing. And they were looking at steroid and drug misuse within rugby union and rugby league in Wales. So both codes at all levels of the game. So amateur, semi-pro and professional. And when you look at all the athletes in the UK that are serving bans for recreational performance enhancing substances or recreational drugs and performance enhancing drugs and substances, the majority of them are actually Welsh rugby players in both men's and women's. It is shocking throughout the Welsh game. Doping and recreational drug use with Welsh rugby players of both codes is shocking. It is ridiculous. I don't know what the stats are now, 8-9 years later, but at the time I watched that live on TV and then I rewatched it again a few times. It generally stuns me that out of, I can't remember how many British athletes were on the banned list, but out of them, out of the rugby players, over half were Welsh. And I think, was it a quarter or a third? Bear in mind population size as well. Wales is not massive compared to England and Scotland in regards to, but it's a lot smaller population density, and those who are registered as playing amateur, semi-pro, and professional sport. It was shocking. It was stunning how ridiculously bad. The problem is, and again, I can't tell you how much has changed in the last 7, 8, 9 years, decade. I wouldn't have thought it's changed too much. And that in itself tells you all you need to know about the state of the game and the culture in the game in Wales. And that's before we talk about the financial difficulties the sport finds itself in and has found itself in for 20 years. When you've got that many players banned from playing in either code, so you're banned from rugby union. By the way, you can't play league either because you're banned from union, but you're on a 2-year wilder ban. So you cannot participate in any professional sport. Some of them are on longer bans, 4 years. It would be interesting to see, and a lot of these aren't high profile players because it would have made national and international headlines if, let's say, Reece Samet. I know he's gone to the NFL and he's doing his career path and he wants to, make the NFL and actually play an NFL game and all that. But let's say Reece Samet, a player of that level, a young, up and coming player, young superstar, very marketable, was to fail a drugs test. That would send shockwaves through not only rugby union or rugby league, but just through sport in this country and globally because he is known overseas. That would have massive implications, massive, and it would be a big thing for a couple of weeks, a couple of months. Now, this is where cycling and athletics, or track and field athletics, it's become so commonplace that a high-profile cyclist or track and field athlete has, failed, that we've become so used to it and so numb to it that it doesn't really shock us anymore. But if let's say a high-profile rugby union player, rugby league, we have seen some lesser players fail tests. But if we were to see a real high-profile, tier 1 international, big-name player fail, I honestly think that, it would have consequences. It would be big news. Again, I don't really want to go into politics, so to speak. Politics, that could be for the other channel, really. It's difficult to separate sport and politics, and I understand that there are some political decisions in regards to Welsh sport that have implications on professional and semi-pro and amateur sports in Wales when it comes to funding from UK athletics via Sports Wales. We saw that during COVID. But I try and stay politics out of the conversation. It's very difficult. But that's a question that, as I don't live in Wales, I can't answer. And B, it's not a conversation that, for me, is for this channel. If this was the other channel and we were discussing, my thoughts on the situation in Wales politically, and I have been following it for a while in regards to the local and national elections we've had, and I have actually studied it at sixth form college because I did a politics A level. So I've actually studied politics and devolution and all that. That's a different discussion because I've done it as a student. I've studied it, I've researched it, read up on it, done exams and coursework on it. That's a discussion for that I have had and I've learnt about, and decisions taken, central government in Westminster and devolved government in Cardiff. Yeah, read up on that. Same as Scotland as well, and devolved government in Scotland. I've read up on it and studied it. But the only time it's worth discussing on this channel is if it impacts sport. Now, when it came to the COVID loans, Sport Wales had different loan arrangements where it was supporting grassroots sport and ice hockey and other things and professional and grassroots and semi-pro sport through COVID loans. Now, the funding matrix for school-age sport, university sport, community, it does vary. But there are funding arrangements there, and there were COVID loans. Oh God! Again, politics. I'm not interested on this channel. If I can avoid it, unless it's sport related. So let's say we're talking about a stadium funding or football regulator, that's different. If we're talking about a sporting regulator that has government back, that is different. But honestly, I don't want to talk about Trump. I don't want to talk about Farage. I don't want to talk about Starmer. I don't want to talk about Badenoch. I don't want to talk about Ed Davey. I don't want to talk about the SNP, Plaid Cymru, whatever the political party is, whoever the political person is. I just don't care. I'm really apathetic when it comes to politics. And unless it impacts sport, I've got no interest. I'm sorry, I've just got no interest. It's too divisive. There was a period where I we're going back a good Trump's first presidency. Actually, we're going back like 6 years. There was a period. I think there was a couple of live streams where I was asked my political views and my views on certain political figures. Trump was one of them. It did lead to a very long, comical but long, and at times X-rated monologue. The following day, someone else asked the question, and the person who had asked the question the day before was in the chat, and he said, "You don't want to go there." And while I make it funny and humorous, over the time I've had this channel, and over the time that live streams have been enabled on the channel, which is over 6 years now, politics, I've become more and more apathetic, and it's not something that I want. I try and keep the content political free. It becomes so toxic in the comments on videos. It becomes really toxic in the chat, which is why the chat is now subscriber only in live stream. Although I was tempted to get rid of the subscriber only option, but it's just too. The fact that the reason why I did that was to make the moderators, you guys who are moderators, your lives easier. Let's be honest, because we had the issues with the trolls. We had issues with some real vile stuff being put in the chat, and it that has the potential to get the channel actually not just demonetized, taken down. So I thought, you know what, let's get rid of the spam. Let's get rid of the trolls. Let's get rid of the vile people. We've built a really good community here, especially this year with the growth in the channel's been fantastic. It's just not worth the hassle. But I've got viewers from all around the world, so I've had questions asking about Trudeau in Canada, the various political figures in America, Australia. I think I had one about New Zealand when Jacinda Ardern was Prime Minister. I thought, well, I don't live in New Zealand. My cousin does, but I haven't spoken to my cousin for 20 years, so I don't know her opinion on the current socialist utopia that is New Zealand, which it isn't, by the way. But no, I look. I'm well known for my political satire with my group of friends and ripping the crap out of all politicians of all left, right, centrist, whatever political leaning. But honestly, Jonathan Pye, I am not. Although I do a very good impersonation of Jonathan Pye when he goes on one of his ranting monologues, because I would challenge Jonathan Pye to be Jonathan Pye. But that's away from the camera. That's away from YouTube. That's different. Even then, I have no. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm right wing. I wouldn't say I'm left wing. I would say I'm more of a centrist. But even then, I'm indifferent. When we say sport is good for our mental health, yes and no. Being a hardcore sports fan can be emotionally taxing. So I'm kind of glad that the Winnipeg Jets are 13-1 to start the NHL season, which is ridiculous. Our start to the season, fantastic. It's very nice to have one of the teams I support actually doing well for once, because most of the teams I support suck. I'm one of those fans that I always go for the underdog, but the teams I support generally don't do very well. So the Winnipeg Jets, with their start to the NHL season, is fantastic, and I'm just riding the wave of happiness right now, because I know end of the season we're not going to be President's Trophy winners and we're not going to win the Stanley Cup. I know that, I can accept that, but while we're winning, it's a good feeling. and I just want the team to make the playoffs and have a decent season. At the end of the day, anything else is a bonus. So it's a good start to the season right now. If we're 500 for the rest of the season, we're making the playoffs. So I'm happy. Blackburn, we started the season well. Our form has now turned to a shower of shit because the ownership is a shower of shit. And John Eustace, I mean, you had no money to sign players. So those lack of signings and letting players go is having an impact. Although we're still reasonable in the table, I'm not expecting us to get promoted. I'm not expecting us to get relegated either. I'm expecting a boring mid-table team this season. There are teams worse than us, so I don't see us getting relegated. Although if our losing streak continues, maybe. Canberra Raiders missed the top 8 in the NRL this season, and the London Broncos may cease to exist in 3 months' time. So the sports teams I follow, generally shit, although the Jets are giving me some hope this season that maybe a once-in-a-lifetime moment occurs. I haven't been this positive about a sports team that I follow for 30 years. I'm going to ride it. Let's be honest, it's one of the few things going well in my life right now. It's a team from the other side of the Atlantic in the prairies in Canada doing well. But generally speaking, the teams I support generally suck, and I have had many a season and many a moment with the head in my hands going, how can you be this bad? Oh, wait, it gets worse. We're going to be worse next season, but still. So my mental health, when it comes to my sports teams, I'm fully prepared every season for a shit season, and many hand in head moments and going, can it get any worse? Oh wait, it has. We're losing some more. So one of my teams doing well, I'll accept that for now. But I'm riding it while it lasts. But sport can be good. It can be a unifier. You can see great moments of community and national joy, or national mourning, depending on what happens. But then again, while it can be good, there are some downsides. We've seen social media, we've seen mainstream media and how they report on managerial appointments, managerial sackings, player transfers, player contracts, player performances. And quite honestly, I have my views, and I've been very critical of my views of the mainstream media and social media in regards. I mean, I'm also guilty of, I try not to bag, really go after an individual player or an individual coach. I will criticize when a tactical decision's not worked with a manager or a coach, or a player's performance hasn't been great in that game, where there's areas in the game where he or she has technically had a weakness and has been exposed by an opposition player in attack and defence. But I try not to go, this player is not very good, or personal attacks. Have I ever had a team I care about go bust or get relegated out of a league? Blackburn ended up in League One. London Broncos, we're about to go bust. The Bracknell Bees have had to rebrand to the Berkshire Bees and had to basically move to a smaller arena. The original Winnipeg Jets relocated to Arizona, and the Arizona Coyotes no longer exist because now they're Utah, and technically they're a brand new team because the Utah. So yes, and no. The only team that I follow that's never ever gone belly up is Canberra, but they've only appeared in one grand final since '93. So in my lifetime, they've appeared, I think, in 3 grand finals. I think they've won 1, lost 2. So yeah. Right, I'm just going to move myself because my body's decided to pack in. I'm not feeling well today. Feeling a bit better than I did this morning, when literally early hours I was sat on the carsy shitting my guts out of my arsehole. Yeah, I've not been feeling very well lately. You can tell this live stream is a little bit more, I'm dropping some F-bombs because at this point, with how I feel, I don't care. Sport fundamentally should be entertaining to watch, yes. But we are obviously starting to see some pushback with things like video assistant referees, VAR in football, the bunker in the NRL, for example. We are starting to see some fan pushback against, not, I wouldn't say necessarily the use of technology, but how the use is being implemented. I feel sorry for match day officials. and the pressure and the scrutiny they are under. I have a lot of sympathy for match officials and referees and linesmen and umpires, depending on the sport. I have a lot of sympathy for them. I really do. They are under a lot of pressure. And yeah, they are human. Mistakes will be made. Well, VAR, semi-automated is the better system, but in reality, the PGMOL, I think I've got that right, and the Premier League, and then now the Championship. I do think the fact that other major European nations and their domestic leagues have decided to go, no, we're not having VAR this season. We've had enough of the negative publicity. The fans have basically given a lot of pushback. The PR has not been great. We're going to not use the system this year. I think Sweden, was the league that went, we're not doing it this year. We're just not using it anymore. It's not working in the way it was intended. The fact that Wolves brought that petition for the Premier League, there's going to come a point where the more it becomes ludicrous and ridiculous, you're going to have fans switching off. You're going to have empty seats in stadiums more often, and you're going to have fans either switching to their local non-league or lower league side, or they're just going to turn their backs on the sport. And when that happens, we're already seeing people, discussing the atmosphere at Premier League games compared to mainland Europe, where you have the ultras, kind of, the big banners and stuff, the tifosi, and how it's a bit more sterile and quiet and doesn't have the same atmosphere. And that's been noted by a lot of people. Ticket price is another thing. And when you throw in VAR into it, it's turning a lot of fans off the game. A lot of fans off the game, which will have an impact. Aberdeen, can they challenge Celtic? Look, I hope that another team not from Glasgow does win, the Scottish Premiership. I think that would be a good thing for the sport north of the border. It hasn't happened since the 80s, and the last thing to do it was Aberdeen. So I hope they do. I hope they can. I hope they can sustain it. Yeah, I mean, look, when you're blocking teams from participating on criteria that have got nothing to do with the team's ability to win or lose or put a team on the field or on the court or on the ice, I don't like that. I do not like that. Because you're basically telling a team owner or a team that you've got to spend money you haven't got on facilities that you don't require because you have facilities, but we have certain standard criteria that it starts to create a division between the haves and have-nots, which ultimately negatively impacts the competitiveness of your league. And so, yeah, and everyone likes a feel-good underdog story where they go on and the little team that could, or the small town team that could against the big city big wigs. But there's a lot of this throughout sporting history where the little small town team with a hardcore local fan base had to overcome loads of hurdles to challenge the big city boys. It happens in every sport and every league. And yeah, I think the over corporatization and the capitalization I think there's too much money in certain aspects of sport in too few hands, and the greed aspect of things is damaging the sport, pro sport. And what is generally scary now is the NHL. All franchises, all 32, are now worth over $1 billion for the first time ever. Whereas before COVID, I think a lot of them were worth several, like $200-300. So the inflation of the values of a lot of the franchises is ridiculous. All of them have increased in value. Not a single NHL team has lost value. They've all increased in value, and that's the first time ever that the least valuable franchise is still worth more than is it 1.01 billion dollars, or 1 billion and something ridiculous. 1 billion and $10 million or something. The inflation of the values. This is Sportico, so this is going by a lot of different metrics. Sportico are actually pretty reliable when it comes to team valuations. It's like the Forbes list of it's like the Times Rich list of sports teams, or the Forbes list. They're generally pretty accurate, or reason with a degree of error of their valuations of what a sports team's worth. $1 billion for the Columbus Blue Jackets. So if the Columbus Blue Jackets ownership wants to sell the team tomorrow, they can say, we're worth $1 billion, give us the money, please. And in part, it's because of the expansion fees that the NHL now requires. And they're not ruling out expansion now that the Arizona situation is resolved with Utah, and a new arena's in the pipeline for the next 3 to 4 years. Expansion's back on the table. By the end of the decade, we're going to have 34, maybe 36 teams on the table. It's also been noted that the NHL has ruled out a return to Quebec, so no return of the Nordiques. And a lot of Canadian hockey fans and hardcore, traditionalists are very upset, but it doesn't make economic sense to go to one of the smaller Canadian metro areas and plonk a team. There's a reason why they moved in the mid-90s. It was because of economy, and the economy in Canada is in a similar situation now with the Canadian dollar, because exchange rate, it costs more money to run a team in Canada than south of the border. Even though they would sell out every game, you would make less money. It would cost more to run the team. It's going to be interesting when the NHL finally announces expansion past 32 teams and makes it official and makes that process official. And what's interesting is this channel's history has basically been in the current era of expansion with Vegas and Seattle and the direction the league has taken the current expansion era, as I'll call it. But my entire hockey fandom has been in the expansion era from the 90s onwards. So I've seen all the latest teams join, the Californian expansion, the expansion into the Sun Belt, the relocation into the Sun Belt, the growth of the game and the success of the game in Florida, with both teams in Florida winning Stanley Cups now. In my lifetime, the failure of Atlanta, second time around, the failure of Arizona, but the fact that the NHL is going to go back to those locations in the future, because the size of the Atlanta and the Phoenix metro areas, they're massive metros. Atlanta and Phoenix, both over 1 million people in both those cities. The metros are huge. Phoenix, I think, is the 4th biggest metro, the 5th biggest metro in the US. Atlanta is like the 6th biggest. These are some of the biggest TV audiences and corporate. They're going to go back to Atlanta. They're going to go back to Phoenix. They're looking at expanding in Texas. We have a very strong idea where the NHL is going to go, and a pretty decent timeline to work with. So that's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. So yeah, that's it. That's always interesting to look at. The fact that England, moving back to what's going on now, Man City losing 4 in a row. That's interesting. I don't think that's happened in the Guardiola era. I think the max he's had defeats in a row is 3. So I think that is interesting. Bit of pressure on Guardiola. I don't even know who they're playing today. I'm going to have to look at all the results today anyway. So have a quick look at all the results in the UK. Oh god, this cold's horrible. Oh shit! I know. I'll just drag to death on air. I would. Let's just get menu. Let's go to sports. What's going on here? Why? That's what we want. Brighton are a good side, though. Brighton. They came from behind. Ooh, right. Let's have a look at all the. Well, I choked to death on air. Oh yeah, Edu has left Arsenal, obviously as sporting director. So there's clearly obviously issues going on there. Wow, this is interesting. I didn't know this was going on. Mendy, who obviously used to play for Man City, is to receive the majority of his unpaid wages that Man City didn't pay him while he was obviously awaiting his trial. So that's quite interesting, that one. Benjamin Mendy is to receive his back pay, basically, which I just find that really interesting. But that's sort of been buried in the news. So the results today. Brentford beat Bournemouth 3-2. Palace, Fulham 2-0 to Fulham. West Ham, Everton 0-0. Wolves beat Southampton 2-0. Southampton are in trouble. They're relegated, in my opinion. Brighton beating Man City 2-1 is big. That is big. Liverpool Villa's 8 o'clock kickoff, so that'd be interesting. So that's about kickoff, Liverpool Villa. So that'd be interesting if Villa get a little upside there. That really does. Liverpool need to take advantage of Man City having a poor run of form. And for it, here, this is what's mad. So people are like, oh, Brighton have beaten Man City. Brighton are 4th. Nottingham Forest are 3rd. And they're there by merit. So let's not go completely shock horror. There's a reason why Forest and Brighton are where they are. And Man City's goal difference isn't amazing. It's not. Tottenham have actually got a better goal difference if it was to go to goal difference and a game in hand. So if Tottenham win tomorrow, they go above Forest and Brighton. And if Man City keep losing games, then it's going to get interesting. Southampton are bottom with 4 points. Ipswich are second bottom with 5. Wolves are third bottom with 6. Palace are above them on 7. Everton and Leicester are tied with 10 points. Leicester have a game in hand. Man United are 13th. And there's discussion about, Jose Mourinho's hinting that he might want to coach at Newcastle. Liverpool have a good chance to extend their lead at the top. They kick off now. So, yes. Let's have a look at the championship. I just want to have a look at the championship. And let's have a look at the score. Oh, go away. Scores and fixtures. I just want to have a look at the results today. Oh, Blackburn have returned to form. They beat Cardiff 3-1. Real good win away from home. I've had enough of the negativity on some Blackburn fan pages. But Middlesbrough 5, Luton 1. Stoke Millwall 1-1. Derby Plymouth 1-1. Leeds beat QPR 2-0. Bristol City, good win 2-0 away at Norwich. Portsmouth in a relegation fight. Big win for Portsmouth 3-1 against Preston. Sunderland Coventry 2-2. And I work with a Coventry fan, so they've had an up and down week. So the table is actually quite interesting. So Sunderland at top, Leeds is second. So 31 points for Sunderland in first, Leeds 29 points in second, Sheffield United 28 points in third, Watford 25 points in fourth, Burnley 24 points in fifth, Middlesbrough 24 points in sixth, goal difference. Burnley are ahead of Borough. Millwall 23 points in seventh, West Brom 22 points in eighth, Blackburn 22 points in ninth, Bristol 22 points in 10th. Again, goal difference, which is why Blackburn are ninth rather than eighth, because West Brom have a better goal difference, except West Brom can't score any frigging goals, especially at home. They can't score goals. Swansea got 19 points. Derby got 19 points. Stoke have got 19 points. That's 11th to 13th. Norwich have got 18 points. Sheffield Wednesday have got 18 points. Oxford, to be fair, I'm really glad Oxford are giving it a good fight this season. They're 16th with 17 points. Coventry 17th with 16 points. Plymouth out of the relegation zone with their draw today with 16 points, but their goal difference is absolutely atrocious. Could kill them come the end of the season. I'm not joking. Hull 15 points in 19th. Preston 15 points in 20th. Luton, wow, they're struggling this season. Luton 15 points in 21st. Goal difference exactly the same as Cardiff, but the head-to-head's better for Luton over Cardiff. Cardiff, same goal difference as Luton in the relegation zone following 3-1 thumping. Portsmouth, with that win, closed the gap on escaping relegation zone. They've got 12 points. QPR have got 10 points. So it's interesting. Let's have a look at League One. I just want to go through all the leagues and all the tables. So let's have a look at the fixtures. Let's have a look at the scores today. Burton 2-0 over Shrewsbury. Wrexham 1-0 over Mansfield. Good response there. Birmingham, Northampton 1-0. Bristol Rovers, Lincoln City 1-0. Crawley, Huddersfield 2-2. Exeter, Charlton 1-0 to Exeter. Fair play. I like Exeter City. I like them to do well. Leyton Orient 3-0 over Blackpool. This is a thumping. Peterborough 6, Cambridge United 1. Stevenage 1, Reading 1. So two clubs that I keep an eye on, partly because I'm local to Reading, but also I've got a connection with Stevenage through my family. Stockport 5, Bolton 0. So my next door neighbour is going to be happy with that result. Wigan lost 1-0 to Wickham. So the table, Wickham are top, 32 points. Birmingham a second, 30 points. Wrexham a third, 28 points. Barnsley a fourth, 25 points, alongside Lincoln, better goal difference. Stockport are sixth. So Wrexham and Stockport doing really well this season. Like to see that. Mansfield are seventh, 24 points, goal difference. Huddersfield, 8th, 23 points. Reading, considering all their off-field problems, 9th, 23 points, and a positive goal difference. Bolton, same amount of points in 10th, negative goal difference. That's why Reading and Huddersfield are above them. Exeter, 11th, 22 points. Peterborough, massive win today, really helps their goal difference. They're 12th with 21 points. Charlton are 13th with 19 points. Stevenage, 14th with 18 points. Rotherham, disastrous last season, not doing great this season, 15th with 17 points, slightly better goal difference than Bristol Rovers. 17th Northampton with 16 points. Blackpool, 18th with 16 points. Wigan, disaster on and off the field, 0 goal differential. 19th with 14 points. Leyton Orient, 20th with 14 points. Crawley, 21st with 12 points. Cambridge United, 22nd, 10 points. Burton Albion, 23rd, 8 points. And Shrewsbury bottom with 8 points and the worst goal difference in the league. Let's have a look at League 2. I won't bother with the non-league today. Let's have a look at the fixtures. Port Vale top of League 2, by the way, just saying. Right. So Harrogate 1, Morecambe 2. It's an interesting Lancashire-Yorkshire bash up there. Salford 0, Carlisle 1. Wimbledon 0, Grimsby 1. So the away teams actually have had a very good record today in League 2. Barrow, Colchester 1-0. Cheltenham, Bromley 1-0. Chesterfield 0, Accrington 3. Come up the Stanley. Doncaster 1, Notts County 1. Fleetwood 1, Bradford 0. So another Lancashire-Yorkshire bash up there. Gillingham 1, Port Vale 0. MK Dons 3, Swindon 1. Tranmere 2, Newport 1, and Walsall 1, Crewe 1. So let's have a look at the table. Port Vale top with 30 points. Walsall second with 27. Notts County third with 27. Doncaster fourth with 27. Goal difference is separating clubs there. Crewe are fifth with 25th. MK Dons are sixth with 24. Grimsby are seventh with 24. Goal difference there. MK Dons. Gillingham eighth with 23 points, just outside the playoff places. Chesterfield are ninth with 22 points. Bradford are 10th with 22 points. Barrow are 11th with 22 points. Again, goal difference. Fleetwood are 12th with 21 points. Salford are 13th with 20th, but a negative goal difference could prove crucial come the end of the season. Wimbledon are 14th with 19 points, so they're not. They're only 5 points behind MK Dons. It's still early in the season. They're equal on points with Newport, but a positive goal differential. Cheltenham 16th with 18 points, negative goal differential. Now we're getting into the negative goal differentials now. Tranmere 17th with 17 points. Accrington 18th with 16 points. Bromley 19th with 15 points. Good to see Bromley doing well there, not going to lie. Harrogate 20th with 15 points. Colchester 21st, 13 points. Swindon, former Premier League club, much like Bradford. They are 22nd with 12 points, but their goal differential is far superior to Carlisle, who've got 11 points. Worse, and Morecambe are bottom 24th with 10 points. There's some sizable Bradford. I mean, look, Bradford and Swindon are ex-Premier League clubs. Now, Bradford are doing all right, but Swindon are really they're not doing well. But Port Vale and Walsall, good to see two former Football Alliance clubs, top two, and Notts County, one of the oldest clubs in the English game, Football League founder in the top three. So 3 of the oldest clubs in an English game in the top 3 in League Two. We like to see that. And one of the youngest clubs in the English game in MK Dons. We don't like MK Dons. We've made our views on their existence very, very clear. Now, I have done my history video on MK Dons up on the channel, and that did get a response from a lot of people. So, yeah, all the leagues are very, very tight. Jokes aside, there are some clubs I'm surprised where they are. In the future, will there be forgiveness for new MK fans? Will there be forgiveness? Look, at some point, there's going to be the next generation. So the current fans, children and grandchildren will become fans of the club. I've got nothing against Milton Keynes as a location having a professional team. It should have happened in a different, more organic way. I've got nothing against that. It's how it occurred in the aftermath and how everyone wants them to lose. At some point, there's going to be a new generation of fans. The thing is, the team hasn't been successful as envisioned with the ownership. They basically took an old Division 1 Championship, basically Premier League Division 1 side, and moved them from Southwest London to the South Midlands, basically. And they've had no success at all. And the way they went about the relocation and the way that there was actually government involvement, they were planning to move the team to Dublin. And this is at the time of the Good Friday Agreement, and there is politics involved in that, and these files have been declassified. I think at some point the ownership will change. At some point, the club may make the Premier League. I don't think it'd be popular if they did, but there's still enough fans of a certain age who remember the crazy gang of the late 80s. He won the FA Cup. Remember what was done to the old Wimbledon FC with the stadium issues and the way that the FA and the Premier League and the Football League screwed Wimbledon around. And the AFC Wimbledon, the Phoenix Club, is everyone's second team. Let's be honest. We've all played them on Football Manager. We've all played them on FIFA. We all want them to do well. The fact they beat them in the FA Cup this season, the fact they beat them every game this season is fantastic. They play. They got the head-to-head is in Wimbledon's favour. Average league positions actually in AFC Wimbledon's favour since Wimbledon have been back in the Football League as well, which is ironic. When they're actually final positions in their league table. The fact they beat them in the FA Cup was fantastic. Everyone was happy with that. Everyone liked that, apart from the few fans. Milton Keynes is interesting as a city because they've got the F1 and they have the ice hockey, which are more established, where you've got your rusted on fans and you've got those people who live in Milton Keynes who are involved in F1, and for the majority of the year they're with the F1 teams traveling around the world. But at the same time, Milton Keynes is one of those locations where a lot of people have moved into the area from other parts of the country. They've taken their fandom of their other teams with them. So you're not going to convert those people who, let's say, might be moving out of London, because London is accepting convention. It might be a Chelsea fan or an Arsenal fan or a Tottenham fan or a Brentford fan or whatever London club. You're not going to convert them. You're not going to convert the people who've moved from Manchester or Birmingham or Coventry or whatever for work, who will support Man United, Man City, Birmingham, Aston Villa. You're not going to convert them. So what you're going to have to do is entice the local youth to buy in. Now, a lot of people can't afford to go to a Premier League game, so they're going to support their local club. Fine. Had Milton Keynes come up organically through the divisions, I think there would have been some love there. The problem is it's basically Wimbledon FC relocated, rebranded, and the fans of Wimbledon FC basically went, to hell with you, we're going to re-establish the club as AFC Wimbledon and go back to Plough Lane, which they've done. And they've got a hardcore fan base in southwest London, whereas MK Dons are in the arse end of nowhere. Let's be honest, where Milton Keynes actually is, and they come under the catchment areas of other clubs that are established, that have had success, that played in the Premier League, that won trophies, and they're in the catchment area of a lot of clubs from the Midlands and the Southeast, and it's very, very hard to build a new fan base when you've got those fans of other clubs that are rusted on and their kids are rusted on, and it's not popular in school. So unless they start going up the divisions, it's not going to work. A bit like Warrington. Warrington is a rugby league town, however. That is key. Warrington is a rugby league town. That's the main sport. They've got a big rugby league fan base. Same with Wakefield. Wakefield's a rugby league town, so any other sport's not going to work there. So they can get away with having football fans living in supporting, Liverpool or Man United or wherever it may be. But it's a rugby league town, main ticket in town, successful club, win silverware. Wakefield, again, the Wakefield as a city, again, rugby league location. It's the only professional sports team around, and it's in rugby league country. Going to have success and failure, but you're not worried about competing with another sport in the location. So you will get fans. Will the London Broncos stay at Plough Lane? We're not even sure if the London Broncos are going to survive as a team. So let's worry about that when February runs around. People in Warrington like the rugby league team, and the people can support Liverpool and Warrington Wolves. Yeah, because you've got the one team in town. You haven't got another professional sport challenging Warrington for the attention. And so if you are a football fan of Liverpool or Everton or Tranmere or whatever football club in the northwest, and you move to Warrington for work, because Warrington is a vibrant city, town, should I say, economically compared to other towns and cities locally, you may actually convert to a Warrington Wolves fan over football club. And because it's a lot cheaper to go to a Warrington Wolves game than a Liverpool or an Everton or a Tranmere or Man United or Bury or whatever football club it is, because of transport cost, ticket cost, and getting to and from. Local, you can just walk to the ground, maybe get a bus, you're there. So, yeah, and when it is a one pro team in a town or a city, one team town, you have a monopoly over the potential fan base. Well, not everyone in Warrington is going to be a rugby league fan, and not everyone in Warrington is going to want to go to a game. But you have the potential to have a monopoly on sports fans in that location. Same with Wakefield. You have the potential for monopoly. Whereas you've got cities like Sheffield or Bristol that are multi-team cities with, I wouldn't say massive population. Sheffield and Bristol have got pretty big populations compared to Warrington, but you're then splitting the demographic of sports fans, for example, of all the various ages into two teams. And a lot of it is to do with what neighbourhood you live in traditionally. Especially in Bristol. Sheffield, not so much, but in Bristol, there is a dividing line between certain bits of the city where one side will be a Rovers, one side will be City. Whereas, like Swindon, for example, you've got the ice hockey team, you have the football team. Reading, you've got the football team at professional level. London obviously has such a population size, you can have multiple professional teams. Same with Greater Manchester, same with Birmingham, Liverpool or Merseyside. You can have multiple professional teams in multiple sports. So obviously, certain cities or regions, you can have multiple teams in a very small catchment area or geographical area, whereas others, maybe you can only have a certain number, you can have less in a catchment area or geographical area because of population. Sheffield sports fans are split between two football teams, ice hockey team. Well, actually, there's two ice hockey teams in Sheffield rugby league. But at the same time, Sheffield has a big student population and is a big centre for sports science as well. And a lot of different pro sports have facilities there, training facilities, rehab facilities, sports science facilities linked to the universities in Sheffield. So Sheffield, Hallam, I think, is the biggest university. So there's a big sporting industry already in Sheffield. So it is a sports and a student city. So that in itself lends it to being able to sustain multiple multiple sports fan groups, basically, in multiple sports on a semi-pro professional basis in the city of Sheffield. It's partly to do with the university and partly to do with the sports industry as a whole and the support industry that goes with professional sport. There's a lot of people based in Sheffield, and there's a lot of sports science and there's a lot of facilities to do with sports training. So there is a separate economy based around that. Same with Loughborough. While Loughborough doesn't really have the pro sports aspect to it, there's still the university is a major employer when it comes to sports science and training. And in the women's rugby union, there is a professional team. But when it comes to pro sport, Loughborough doesn't have the same as Sheffield, a much smaller population. But because of the university and its links with its sports program, you have the other related industries involved with sports science and sports research. Loughborough is a location where a lot of sports-related businesses want to go and have offices and employment opportunities. And a lot of sports teams will actually send their athletes to sports rehab. I think there's injury rehab facilities at Loughborough where the sports science works with long-term injury rehabilitation. And Loughborough is like sports physios and sports science and sports analytics. Same as Sheffield. There's a lot of that kind of going on there. But there's certain towns and certain cities which actually have a connection with certain sports. So horse racing with Newmarket, for example, and Ascot, but Newmarket heavily reliant on horse racing as an industry for its local economy. If you get rid of horse racing or ban it, Newmarket, the unemployment rate goes through the roof, and you would decimate the local economy. Because you've got horse racing as the industry, but then you've got this, vets, farriers, the various, bookmakers have a lot of people employed there, with offices, sponsors, the racecourse itself, the trainers, the local farms that will have facilities to stable horses. There's a lot that goes into it. And Newmarket is not a very big place. It's not a very urban place. It's in the arse end of nowhere. And if you get rid of the horse racing as the sport and the industry, you've just killed Newmarket as a location. It would devastate the local economy. Now, granted, there's not a lot of young people in Newmarket, so it's not let's say, the most vibrant place for young people. But you get rid of horse racing, you've just destroyed Newmarket as an area. Loughborough didn't get dropped from Netball Super League, even though Loughborough doesn't have a big sports arena. Yeah, I mean, again, it's the university aspect of it. Netball is a big university sport. Loughborough is a very good sporting university in a variety of sports: field hockey, rugby union, swimming, athletics. There's a big sports program which involves the university, and they also get a lot of funding from UK Sport and the government for a lot of their facilities and projects. And the fact that the Loughborough may not be known, as a pro sports capital of the world, but when it comes to women's pro sports, actually, their women's pro sports side of things with the rugby union and the netball, they do quite well, and it means non-university people are actually watching and going to games, buying tickets, buying merchandise, engaging with the women's teams. Even the men's rugby union team is pretty decent at Loughborough, if we're being honest. And given the right financial backing and given the right promotion, they hypothetically, if they had the facilities, could be a Premiership team. Hypothetically, I mean, we are talking hypotheticals here, but rugby union's a big thing. There's a big rugby union presence in Loughborough. There's a lot of professional rugby union players who've actually got a university at Loughborough, so it does have that connection with the development of amateur to professional player development. And on the women's side of things, yeah, obviously, a lot of the England Red Roses, for example, play for Loughborough. And the women's netball, yeah, absolutely. A lot of the women's national side are Loughborough players. So, again, if for whatever reason you were to lose rugby union or netball from Loughborough, it would actually have a negative impact on the local economy. And I guess Loughborough is the closest thing to a British equivalent of US college. Durham's got a good rugby union set up. Obviously, Oxford and Cambridge have the varsity match at Twickenham when it comes to rugby union. They have the boat race. So you could argue Oxford, Cambridge, Loughborough, Sheffield, Hallam, and Durham is the closest we're going to get to the US equivalent. Yes, the culture difference between US collegiate NCAA and Europe is very, very noticeable. But we just don't put the same emphasis on it that the US and to some extent the Canadians do in certain locations. We just don't put the emphasis on it. And there's a reason for that, is because the strength of our professional sports teams with their youth setups, which is completely different to the franchise draft system that the North Americans have. We have got a different sporting culture whereby the professional clubs have their own youth systems and youth scouts and player development from about 11 years old through to the senior side, whereas it's more focused on the education system in North America, whereas here, if you're talented enough in amateur grassroots level at school or at a grassroots club, you will get noticed by a professional sports team's head scout, youth scout. You will get offered the opportunity to have a training session, and you will be given the opportunity to go through trials, etc., and get into the system that way. And it's pretty similar in Australia and New Zealand as well when it comes to scouting, um, and most of Europe. You are scouted as a youngster, um, and you're good enough, and you have the, the the talent ceiling. So you may be really talented or quite show some ability as a youngster, but it's your development ceiling, which is where you go from being an under 21 superstar to first team regular. Um, Field hockey is actually surprisingly quite good at university and does quite well. There just isn't the money in field hockey at you know uh, at league level. There's obviously organised field hockey leagues, but there just isn't the money. Then there isn't the TV interest. If there was a TV deal that could be put in place and the right marketing, then yeah, you could potentially market field hockey as a professional sport and pay the players. But there just isn't the TV interest. This is where a lot of these sports do struggle because they don't have a TV broadcast partner. If you can get broadcast partners to broadcast the domestic league, you and then also sell that to an overseas market, predominantly the US and potentially Southeast Asia, China, then you can suddenly go, we can now pay the players. Now, field hockey is a very well organised sport in this country, has a very good player base, has a decent number of fans who will, support field hockey and, follow the team overseas when they play in tournaments and support their local clubs and be members of their local clubs. I've got friends who play field hockey, and I had friends at school who were very into their field hockey, very good players for school, organised school level. Um, you know, in the first for hockey and everything, and hockey wasn't the most popular. It was a choice sport, so you had your rugby union, you had your football, and you had your field hockey, and not everyone wanted to play football or rugby union. They wanted to play field hockey, and that was given as an optional. And you needed enough players to form a team. I didn't enjoy field hockey. I was a goalkeeper, but there's only one goalkeeper spot per team, so that was already taken. And so the spot's taken, and the backup spot's taken. You don't need a third goalkeeper. And so I didn't enjoy field hockey for that aspect in regards to it was an optional sport and my favourite position, there were better players in that position. So who had more enjoyment of playing the sport and have played the sport for longer. So there you go. I just didn't have the enjoyment of it. I didn't have the interest for it. But yeah, no. At the same time, they got a TV or media partner interested in broadcasting, and then selling the broadcast rights both domestically and internationally. Then yes, you could in theory get a professional sport, but you would also need attendance. For any professional sport to be viable, you need fans and attendance and gate receipts. So and that's where rugby union, rugby league, for example, there's lesser team sports that still have a lot of high participation level. At the top level are more sustainable than field hockey is they have fans in attendance in the not just thousands but tens of thousands at games, whereas field hockey you might be lucky to get hundreds, if not a few thousand at a game. So there's your problem, and so there's your difference. How much do you charge for tickets? You can't charge an arm and a leg for a ticket for a field hockey game because guess what? The players are amateur or semi-pro, so you can't justify saying that's going to be £200 a ticket, please, just to make the same amount of money that £20 a ticket would make in rugby league. It doesn't work. You wouldn't get fans through the door. Plus, it is seen more as an upper middle class sport to lower upper class sport, so it's upper middle class upwards. It's seen as a very elitist sport played by very wealthy people. which is an unfair stereotype because a lot of working class people who do go to university do enjoy playing field hockey, did enjoy playing it at school and did very well, but it is seen as an upper middle class sport. So, at the same time, we could have NCAA style organisation. The difference is you can be a professional athlete in this country and go to university, whereas in North America, to be a collegiate athlete, you cannot be professional to represent the NCAA. There's a difference. So there's another difference to the sporting culture. Here in this country, there are many pro athletes who are professional, who are playing rugby league, rugby union, cricket, football, ice hockey, who are also doing university degrees and are technically students. There's nothing to say you can't be a professional athlete and a student at the same time. Whereas in North America, if you are a student athlete, you are under the NCAA rules, which means you can't get paid to be a pro athlete. There are rules against that, which is bizarre to me, but it's the rules they have in place. Whereas over here, you can be a pro athlete and be doing a university degree at the same time. That's why we don't have an NCAA system. That's one of the main reasons why we don't have an NCAA system. Just facts. Pro athletes are allowed to have university degrees at the same time and do university courses, whereas in North America they're not. It's just how the rules work. This is where the NCAA, there's question marks over, should they actually allow their athletes to attend college and be pro athletes like we do in Europe. But also, some of the sports, so field hockey, a bit quicker on the feet, hand-eye coordination, the difference in your coordinate, your skill set. But not everyone who plays rugby has to be a beast. It's a stereotype that you've got to be a big, burly, front row 18 stone, minimum 18 stone prop to play. That's classed as a mobile prop, by the way. There's a lot of outside backs are big, but also a lot of outside backs are quite small and slight. And there's some forwards who are on the smaller scale, still 15 stone, still big blokes. They're just smaller because they might be a blindside flanker, for example. They're still massive units. So when you say heavier set, that's a misnomer. But unfortunately, the way rugby union's gone, and rugby league to a certain extent, over the last 20 years is you've got to be huge. And the smaller speedsters have been, not I would say forced out of the game, but they're not as commonplace as they once were. Although, in rugby league's case, with the rule changes we've seen in recent years, with the speed of the game being sped up, the 6 again rule, for example, and the speed of the game, the speed of the ruck speed being sped up, smaller guys or slighter in build, they've come back into the game at the top level. They're now getting less bashed up because the big guys are knackered. So fitness is and cardio has a lot to do with it, and build has something to do with it. But it's the same with ice hockey. Skill is now being rewarded again. For many years, it was physicality was rewarded. So there's a trade-off between size and skill and speed. You want big athletes, but you want skillful athletes as well. Field hockey is a team sport small people can excel at. That's how India are good. India are good at it because they made it their national sport. People think it's cricket, it's actually field hockey. Also, 70% of hockey sticks are made in India and Pakistan because they have the right wood. Karachi is actually hockey stick capital of the world. I think 70% of hockey sticks are made in Karachi in Pakistan or something ridiculous like that. Well, they used to be. No, Pakistan and India do very well at field hockey, partly because they manufacture a lot of the hockey sticks, and partly it's a misnomer that it's cricket, it's field hockey. And this goes back to colonial days. They just picked up the sport. It suited, I think it was the military that used the sport as a fitness tool and team building tool. Because in cricket, when you're the batting team, the majority of your team are in the pavilion. They're not doing any teamwork. They're just sat there lounging around for 4 days. or half a test match, or half a match. You're in the pavilion. Whereas field hockey, everyone's involved. So it's the teamwork aspect, and there is a bit of physicality with field hockey. It's not a non-contact sport. You will see bumping and barging. You will see contact between players. And women's field hockey is brutal. They swing those sticks and teeth and noses, and they hurt each other. Well, you can't. There's a teamwork aspect to field hockey, and the Pakistani and Indian militaries, they a lot of their universities as well. It's a good team working thing. Um, I was no good at field hockey because smaller players would turn me inside out because I'm too fat. So, look, again, whether you enjoy playing it or not, or you weren't good or it, your physical attributes and your skill set weren't suited to it. That's just your genetics. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy it or give it a go or play or whatever or coach. That's where there's this misnomer that you've got to be a certain perfect size ratio. If we're being honest, yeah, field hockey is a certain type of sport. It's quite a quick sport as well. You've got to have a certain fitness level to play it. It's not as slow paced as people think. It's quite a quick paced sport. It's very similar. It's very similar to roller hockey or street hockey or field or even ice hockey. The same principles apply. Um, they really do. The same basic principles apply. Um, and it's an underrated sport. It is an underrated sport that not a lot of people talk about on social media, and I've not seen any other YouTubers discussing field hockey at all. Um, I mean, I look. I don't know enough of the big name player. I don't know any of the players. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't name you a single. Could not name you a single field hockey player. Just because I just do not have the knowledge. But there's no other YouTubers I've found who've ever discussed field hockey. So, and that's to do with how the sport is promoted, exposure, and getting a decent media rights deal, even if it's just local or national news reporting more often, and it making the sports news headlines. That might go some way into just the 24-hour sports news. If they could have just a segment going, and here's the field hockey reports, even if it's like just a minute or 2 minutes, that might go some way to increasing the exposure. It doesn't get the media exposure on the sports news cycle, broadcast. Outside, I think it's the Olympics and the Commonwealths. There's just no coverage, and maybe the occasional World Championships or World Cups. There's just not much media coverage. You might go, oh, there's a World Championship, World Cup, field hockey. Here's one article on this sports website. It might be a 5-minute read. Here's the list of results today. Done. A lot of the Sikhs are also in the military as well, so there's that military link. But no, certain sports in certain countries struggle for growth and support and attention and recognition because of the media coverage and the exposure and the accessibility. And there is the perception that field hockey, much like golf and cricket, is seen as more of and rugby union is more as an upper class sport, which isn't always the case. Partly because they don't have the same exposure to the average working family. Now, if let's say the US was to latch onto field hockey and promote it at university through the NCAA, suddenly you might find there's a professional league gets set up because these players playing NCAA level, which is basically professional level, let's be honest, in all but name, they're going to want to be a professional athlete in their post-college career. You need a professional sports league to do that, which is why the NBA has now got its minor league affiliates, while the NHL's got multiple minor league affiliates now, both in Canada and in the US. It's why Major League Baseball's got the minor league system. That's why the MLS has got a minor league system, because they're all NCAA sports. The NFL is the only, American football is the only professional sport in North America where you have the CFL in Canada and you have the NFL in the US. The XFL is a bit of a joke, to be honest, but that's my personal opinion. It's not long-term sustainable. So you've got the two professional leagues on either side of the border, and you have the NCAA collegiate system, and that's it. There is no minor league system. You could class the CFL as the minor league system, but there is no minor league system. And so there's a limited number of roster spots for the NFL. Whereas the other major leagues in North America, they're not the only professional leagues that those sports have. So there are options for those players to play professionally overseas, outside of the US and Canada. Now, if field hockey was to become real popular with the NCAA and have an NCAA program where players were playing, and we're talking hundreds, if not thousands of students were playing organised NCAA at the various, level, was it Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, and then the other collegiate divisions. Eventually, you would be forced to have a pro league set up because you suddenly massively increase the player base, and there's a reason why the NCAA colleges exist with their sports programs is sports scholarships, because they get money, and the TV deal's worth ridiculous. The fans in attendance is ridiculous. Well, if they're launching the league again in India, that tells you something. And at some point, there's a lot of big Indian population now, of subcontinental population now in North America, and they like their cricket. They also like their field hockey. At some point, there's going to be the NCAA going to look at that and go, right, okay, rugby union is now an NCAA sport. They've got Major League Rugby. Obviously, the MLS, guess what? Football or soccer played by NCAA. Baseball, basketball, ice hockey, American football, obviously the traditional North American pro sports. The only one that doesn't have a professional league outside North America is American football. Really, there's a NFL Europe. They're trying again, but let's be honest, it's not going to succeed. Let's be honest. But the other major leagues, you could get a professional contract elsewhere if you're a North American. With the growth of the Indian, Pakistani, and Bangladeshi, and even Sri Lankan populations in the US and Canada over the last 50 years, especially in the last 20 years, but Canada over the last 50, but the US more recently, and a lot of them having kids and their kids going to college. And those youngsters wanting to play cricket and field hockey, you're going to see the NCAA start having organised field hockey and cricket teams and divisions, and eventually that will fall, because we've got Major League Cricket coming. We've got Major League Cricket. You're going to see Major League Field Hockey, or the National Field Hockey League. So that'll be NF. So the National, so NFHL. There you go, the National Field Hockey League. There you go. And you're going to see an organised league structure with field hockey being played within the next decade, 15 years, I have no doubt, because of the growth of the Indian and Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities and Sri Lankan communities in the US. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the fact that they're relaunching it, it's professional, the players are getting paid, you will see talent from outside of India go there to play to get paid. The US wants to be world champions at everything, wants to have, every sport. They want to have a professional league and everything. They want to own, they want to invest, they want to buy our sports teams, they want to be the best at everything. They're not got a great record with netball and field hockey. One of the big things is they want to beat Canada. The other big thing is they want to beat the Russians and the Chinese. So as long as the Russians and Chinese aren't good at it, they're probably not going to take it up. But if the Canadians do well at it, they want to beat their local rivals. So it's going to be interesting to see the future of a sport like field hockey in the US with the NCAA, with the subcontinental Asian population that has grown massively in Canada and the US over the last 20 to 30 years. Massive. And a lot of it is on the West Coast, ironically, which is where I get the majority of my US viewers is actually the US West Coast, which with time difference is ridiculous. It'd be midday in California, nearly 1 o'clock in the morning in California, well, afternoon, shall I say, and Washington and Oregon. Yet the majority of my viewers from the United States are from Oregon, Washington, and California. It's mad that. Ironically, that's whenever I do rugby union, rugby league content, there's always a fair proportion of my viewers are from the US and from the US West Coast. That's, for me, insane. Now, when it comes to any other sport, I don't know what it is, but California, Washington, and Oregon, California and Washington are my top 2 US states. Texas is obviously going to be up there because they're sports mad in Texas. Utah. Yeah, Utah. When the Utah Hockey Club actually, we find it, we know it's going to be the Utah Yeti when it's officially confirmed that that's what they're going to rebrand to. I wouldn't be surprised if my Utah viewership goes up. But yeah, Florida, I get a lot of views from Florida. But yeah, the majority of my US views don't come from the big metro areas on the Atlantic seaboard, apart from Florida. Not New York, not Boston, not Philly, not Baltimore, not Washington, D.C. They actually come from California. I've got a lot of viewers in the Seattle metro. I've got a lot of viewers in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale metro in Florida. California, it's all over California. I couldn't tell you the city in California or the metro, but when you look at the channel analytics and you go on the cities tab, it's very interesting when it comes back with the locations. If a viewer is publicly putting that location out there, it's very, very interesting looking at the locations people are viewing from. Certain locations, like in Australia, which is on the east coast of Australia, like Brisbane and Sydney, Townsville, Canberra, Melbourne. Okay, I can understand that. But when you've got really unique places that are smaller locations in a much bigger metro, like a suburb or a smaller, smaller city that's dominated by in a metro area, because the way the US does its metro, you've got the suburban metro cities and all that, and you don't know, you've never heard of this place before, this town or city or incorporated community, wherever it may be, and you type it in and you find the location and you go in through the zip code or whatever, and then you find it and go, this is a little suburb or little incorporated city in much larger metro. There's one called Pacific, Washington, which is part of the Seattle Tacoma metro. got a lot of viewers from or one particular viewer may watch regularly, but there's viewers from that metro. Wesley Chapel, Florida, got viewers there. Now, maybe one person who lives there may have spoken to someone else, shared the channel's link or whatever. They might say, check this guy out, he's got a video up. People talk. But when you've got areas like that where someone may watch 5 or 6 different videos in a day from that location, that's interesting. Now, I do know that I have subscribers in California, New York State, Florida. I do know that. But it's very interesting when you're seeing viewers and subscribers from very unique, different locations where, you know, that's an interesting place you're viewing from. Or I haven't heard of this town or city before, or wherever it may be. Well, that's a new one. And I look at the analytics, and there are some locations that I'm surprised I've got viewers from around the world. It's true. I've got viewers in New Zealand. I've got viewers in Australia. I've got viewers in the Pacific Island nations like Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. But then I look at some of the other places. I've got viewers in Chile. I've got viewers in Vietnam, Thailand, the UAE. Very popular in the UAE, apparently. Scandinavia. Across Europe, but Scandinavia is a big one. Very interesting, the viewership from Germany and Italy and France. Got a lot of the Netherlands, very popular in Germany, in comparison to some of the other countries in Europe. Partly because a lot of Germans speak English, and I've covered a lot of German football clubs and a lot of German managers and German players and things like that. But very popular in Scandinavia. But yeah, I am surprised with, for example, the US viewership, how it's plateaued and actually declined. Although the last little bit, viewership in the US has risen again, which is nice to see. Australia, for the most part, has overtaken the US now. But the US, it's nice to see viewership climbing a little bit in recent weeks, which is nice. And New Zealand viewership's gone up a bit in recent weeks, which is nice. Nice to see viewers from New Zealand. But no, some of the cities people view from, I am surprised with. So that's kind of cool. It's a cool little thing. And to be fair, the last few weeks has been a bit of a grind on the channel. Viewership's been down from where it has been for most of the year. This year, the growth on the channel's been mad. So I was expecting a down month here or there, but the growth on the channel has been pretty good and pretty amazing, if I'm being honest. I'm not going to lie, it has been pretty amazing. It would be nice to see more channel members. It would be nice to see more super chats, obviously. But you can't, have everything all the time. It doesn't happen like that. It is what it is. And I discussed in the members video earlier today that I did about the misconception that YouTubers get make loads of money. A lot of them still have regular day jobs. Very, very few do it full time, and that's their only income. A lot of them it's just a little bit of pocket money to help pay the bills. Very few YouTubers not only make money but make a lot of money where they can do it full time, and that is their day job. That is their income, and they are able to do it full time, and that is their only income, and they don't have to worry about paying bills, paying rent, feeding themselves, mortgages, anything, medical bills, whatever it may be. And they make themselves fully self-employed, and that's where they make their money. Very few do that. Those that do are in the minority. And at the moment, we're not fully monetized in the sense that we're getting ad revenue. So we're only getting membership revenue and super chat revenue and super thanks. We're not making a lot of money. We haven't even got paid yet. We've got to hit a threshold to get that payment, and there's still a bit of ways to go before we hit that payout threshold. And as soon as, let's say, one of you was to donate, let's say £10, 30% of that, £3, goes to Google, YouTube, and there's some other fees as well. So in the end, I'm lucky to get £7. So I lose money anyway. So when you, let's say, see that money icon, that money symbol, and you go, right, I'm going to click that. I'm going to go, here's some money. I'm going to give you £1, £2, £5, 10, 20, whatever it may be. Out of that, YouTube takes 30% anyway. And depending on what tax code and how you work out your taxes, and this is not classed as my primary income. So at the moment, I don't have to pay tax on it if and when we do start making money because of my day job and my tax code. But when we hit the point where we're earning enough to reach tax thresholds to have to pay tax on it, that gets taken off as well. So in the end, I'm not making a lot of money at all. And when I was monetized before with ad revenue under the old monetization policies that YouTube had back in 2017, 2018, when I was initially monetized, I'm looking at how much each video actually made, and it's a penny. Some of my more popular videos that have thousands of views made, if I was lucky, £1. And that's if every ad was unskippable and everyone watched every second of every ad and didn't skip them. And the old banner ads, if they didn't click the old minimize icon. Yeah. So didn't make a lot of money. And that is very, very frustrating. Very frustrating. And even out of YouTube Premium, out of those who sign up to YouTube Premium, how that's distributed amongst, depends on how many YouTube Premium viewers you have to get that little bit of money from the YouTube Premium subdivided. It's not a lot. Not a lot. And it is frustrating, and it's something that regular viewers don't necessarily realize, that a lot of YouTubers actually operate at a loss, and others are not making a lot of money in order to do this. And then you've got to deal with copyright takedowns and DMCA and a lot of other stuff, and issues with the algorithm, which is a big thing, and various things with the bell notification icon, and does it work? And yeah, it can be frustrating at times, very frustrating at times. And there's been times where I've wanted to just jack this in and give up and not continue with creating content. There has been times, and I've discussed it in videos before. So, it's something that has been weighing on my mind at times. That do I see a future on the platform? I think some of the mistakes YouTube have made in regards to monetization have actually hurt themselves and creators. I think they should go back potentially to monetization policies pre 2018, but have stricter punishments for those who do regularly breach, criteria and the rules. And unfortunately, they've gone in this direction. I understand the reasoning why, but there was a period where YouTube damaged its brand and its image by reacting in a way that was, rather than proactive, was reactive in regards to bad content, bad actors, and yeah, I have no love lost for the Logan brothers. Let's say, the Paul brothers, should I say? Jake and Logan Paul. I have no love lost for them. Yet they've managed to make a fortune out of being dickheads, because that's the thing. And they continue to make stupid amounts of money off the back of basically being absolute knobheads less than a decade ago. And there seems to be no ramifications for them being disgusting human beings. If anything, they've got wealthier and more famous, which is just sums up, just sums things up really. And then there's someone like me who sticks by the rules and does it the right way, and algorithm doesn't want to do anything because not controversial enough. But there we go. In regards to what the professional India Hockey League has been relaunched, it'll be interesting to see if it's successful. The sport is popular enough in India, and there's enough good players outside India who play the sport who could be those overseas talent, which could then ultimately lead the drive for the professionalism to potentially work in Europe and elsewhere around the world, and Australia and New Zealand, where it's quite popular, which in itself, as I say, that could be the catalyst for the sport to grow professionally internationally. But again, you're going to need broadcasters, you're going to need sponsors who are willing to promote, and you've got to try and crack the North American sports market. If you can get any interest of any kind in North America, it takes that one really wealthy individual who already has an interest in professional sports as a businessman or woman who may already own a sports team or teams to have their interest, piqued by, okay, this is a bit interesting, and can see that as an investment opportunity, and suddenly the trajectory of the sport may change. Because the way that the mainstream sports media works in the US is just on a different level to the rest of the world. And the way sponsors and broadcasters and promoters work in the US is just on a different level of intensity. If you can get a handful of them interested in a sport, suddenly your sports trajectory changes dramatically, and the sports finances and future changes dramatically. In saying that, look how long it's taken professional association football to really become established and now grow at a healthy level outside of the MLS at grassroots level. Look how long that took. It's taken 3 decades for professional soccer or association football to not only get established, but grow organically without just the MLS expanding. It's taken a very long time. It took getting the right senior veteran players, like your Beckhams, your Messis, your Kakars, your Pirlos, getting those right top quality players to come at the right time in their careers and promote them in the right way on traditional and on social media. Ibrahimovic, I think, was a real catalyst. That doesn't get talked about enough. For suddenly getting the right promotion, the right players at the right time, and suddenly now every young kid wants to be Messi. Every young kid wants to replicate what Ibrahimovic did a decade ago. Suddenly, you're seeing organic growth at grassroots level. There are still issues and obstacles in the way, and the best US players don't play in the MLS. They're playing over in Europe, but the pathways are now there that weren't there 30 years ago, and there's definite, I think, sustainable growth going forward. But it took a long time. It's doable, given the right governance and the right investment and getting the right pieces in the right places and the right promotion. It is very doable and can be very lucrative. And with the World Cup coming in a year and a half's time, we're going to see more opportunities for the growth of association football to occur, without a shadow of a doubt. Now, whether the World Cup is a good quality World Cup for what we see on the playing field, and the atmosphere is good with what we see in the stands, considering how the Copa America went in the summer, which was disastrous and wasn't well received by fans. There was a lot of issues, and it didn't show the US in a good light in regards to organisation, quality of play, quality of officiating, quality of pitches. Left a lot to be desired. There's a lot of improvements to be made for 2026. There's no doubt that the fans are passionate and they are willing to, adopt the sport, learn the sport, learn the history, the culture. If, the growth of the sport in the US continues, it's all good. But there we go. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. It's been an interesting live stream. We have discussed a lot. There's always interesting discussions to be had. I would argue that, field hockey is one of those sports that doesn't get the coverage in the mainstream media, doesn't get the coverage on social media, yet you've got the potential of over 1 billion fans in India alone. You've got the potential of that being a massive market that could potentially grow to other markets. And with the Indian and subcontinental Asian population, the various communities in Europe and North America and Australasia as well, you have the potential to have a very well supported, profitable professional sport if it is governed and marketed in the right way. But from field hockey's perspective, outside India, though, I think there's a real push to have it professionalised. Just there doesn't seem to be the appetite to turn it into a fully professional sport outside of India. It just doesn't have. There's not the appetite. There's not the willingness from governing bodies and national and the game, the sport, internationally outside of India to have it professional. And until that happens, it wouldn't be viable. Just to have India as the only country play professionally just wouldn't work. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very much for your questions. We've droned on for over 3 hours. There's a lot of fireworks going off outside, and you can probably hear them on the live stream. So I'm going to call that a stream. In a few hours' time, the Rugby League kicks off in Australia, which I want to watch because it's the culmination of the Pacific Challenge, which has been fun, and there's some big games in the next couple of hours that I'm looking forward to watching. So from me for now, thank you very, very much, and I'll have some more content for you guys very, very soon.